right, y'all. It is 10:30 p.m. here on the East Coast. We are live, y'all. We have live call-ins. Good night. So 540-251-7687. Call in, get your voice heard, or give a shout out. Before we get started, make sure y'all hit that bell button. So y'all get notified whenever we come on air. We usually are on air every day. If we have breaking news, we usually come on at 4:30 Eastern Standard Time. If not, then we are on at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time here on the East Coast. We have a lot to go over tonight, y'all. We have threats from Russia, from Ukraine, yesterday's massive strike on Moscow that left Moscow looking like apocalyptic. I mean, it was, as you can see on the screen, it was crazy. The biggest strike I've seen Ukraine do by far in the whole war. By far. I mean, this is massive. Massive. Now, some of the damage is from air defense systems. So, Russia's air defense is just totally collapsed. So, hats off to Ukraine, man. They are putting a whooping on Russia right now. Russia is collapsing. They have no gas. They can barely even fly their planes. It's getting crazy. We have word that Iran has also, and we're going to go into the Middle East now, y'all, for a second and get a little intro on what's going on before we actually start the news. We also have Iran shutting off the strait again, and we are going to get in further details of what's going on about that as well. So y'all don't want to miss the night, man. It's a lot going on. We are going to try to keep a close eye on about what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. We have Ukraine threatening Belarus. They have a week to get their forces off their border, or they're going to attack Belarus. This is Ukraine saying this. Like, it's getting crazy. Like, they're literally talking about you attacking a whole other country now. But I mean, you can't believe, because Russia is setting up a offensive in Belarus. So, and we're going to get further detail of that as well. But further ado, make sure y'all drop that like button. And if y'all are new to the channel, please hit that follow and subscribe button. We are trying to get pushed out more here, y'all, so we can actually get the real news and no BS straight out to y'all in y'all's living room and in your hand. So please drop that like button and share the video if you can on your platforms. I really appreciate it. The more views we have, the better. The more views we have, the more we get pushed out. So if y'all can just hang in there. We are working on getting, also, I apologize about the internet service with the stoppage. We are working on getting that fixed, so please just bear with us. And we will have way better quality here coming up soon. So just bear with me, and let's get to the news, y'all.
Very, very big news coming up here in the next week or so, that Ukraine is now threatening to attack hostile Belarusian forces on the border, and that's apparently coming up in the next 7 days or so, and that's a huge one right there. We're also seeing that Iran is closing the Strait of Hormuz today amid new threats, and also Moscow's been devastated for a third time today in another major attack in just the last 72 hours, and we have footage galore, but it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're covering the past 24 hours in the news from around the world, as we have have been able to hear of significant developments over the course of the day, particularly from Eastern Europe and also some developments from the Middle East, as we have been able to hear that the state of Ukraine and Belarus today are now eyeing an open conflict amongst the two nations, as the Belarusians are now stating that an attack on a bus within the Bryansk Oblast, which apparently killed several Belarusian citizens, was conducted by the armed forces of Ukraine, although at the moment, we have not really been able to get a large amount of information about this alleged attack, or what's being stated about it for that matter. However, the Ukrainians completely refuted and denied that the attack was ever conducted by the armed forces of Ukraine, and have stated, on the other hand, that the Belarusians need to remove specific surveillance systems from the border regions with Ukraine in less than a week. Otherwise, the Ukrainians are going to forcibly remove them themselves and move forward with destroying the entirety of the industrial base of the Republic of Belarus. Outside of that, the Russian Federation appears to be dealing with continuing crises of their own within the nation's capital of Moscow, as a third wave of drone attacks has been conducted over the day, with a large amount of them once again making it into Moscow and slamming down onto their targets below. In the meantime, the Russian Federation is racing to equip more air defense systems, even more than we've seen prior, in the city to attempt to try and deal with the massive influx of drones. We've also seen that a significant amount of Russian propagandists and spokespeople for the Russian government have continued to try and make claims that the situation isn't that bad, as everyone is still under the dark cloud of oil still floating over the city. And they have stated that instead of looking outside the windows, everyone ought to look on their television screens to watch how good the Russian military is doing in Ukraine, which isn't really being shown on the televisions. Outside of that, we've also been able to hear that Poland is warned of a looming attack by the Russian Federation on Polish territory, and has stated that all NATO allies must be vigilant and constantly aware of the situation being seen on the eastern frontier, and must be ready to react to any emergency situation that may arise within the region. At the same time, the Russians are now issuing bomb shelters in the area of Kronstadt Island and the Kronstadt Naval Harbor, home to the significant portion of the Baltic Fleet of the Russian Navy. And we've also heard that further strikes have been conducted inside the Russian Federation elsewhere, particularly within occupied Crimea. We've also seen that within the Penza area, it appears that the Russians are now conducting a spot mobilization, with checkpoints being set up in the streets to find any able-bodied males that can be conscripted according to Russian law, and those citizens are now being dragged out of their cars and thrown on the buses, and apparently sent straight to the barracks to receive some sort of minimal training, and then immediately shipped to the front in Ukraine. Additionally, Ukrainian armed forces have been holding the front lines vigorously today, inflicting significant casualties on the Russian armed forces and generally stopping all advances over the course of the day. We've also been able to hear additional news and reports out of the Middle East today, showing that the situation appears to still be in a state of suspended or animated collapse, if we want to call it that, as we have seen that the Islamic Republic of Iran has now closed the Strait of Hormuz and is firing on civilian ships attempting to pass through the area, and is now stating that they will only open the Strait of Hormuz and adhere to their end of the bargain as long as the United States adheres to everything in the memorandum of understanding that they laid out, meaning that the U.S. either has to fork over that big fat bucket of cash, or the Iranians are going to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed for as long as they possibly can. Basically, either they can fleece the United States and get a whole bunch of money, or they're going to keep the strait closed and screw us over anyways. Could you even imagine? We've also been able to hear that the Russian nuclear scientists that were working at the Bushehr nuclear power plant are going to be making their hero's return to continue working on the power plant and constructing the first nuclear power plant within the Islamic Republic of Iran. In the midst of this all, we've also been able to see that Israel's offensives inside of southern Lebanon, specifically around Nabatea, are continuing in large scale, and Israeli defense forces have been seen engaging and heavily hitting Hezbollah forces, and also taking heavy hits of their own, as the IDF has stated last night that 4 soldiers, which is actually the entirety of one tank crew of an armor corps, were killed last night around the area of Nabatea, which we believe is the Merkava Mark IV, which we saw burning in the middle of the night. We've also been able to hear that the IDF has made additional statements today on the behalf of the Israeli government, stating that they will continue their military objectives inside of southern Lebanon, hell or high water, and absolutely nobody is going to be stopping them from conducting those further military actions. As side news in the region, just to speak about the flea circus that's going on in some areas, apparently there's either an airstrike that happened in Idlib, or some sort of a offspring of Al-Qaeda has conducted an attack within that area, as explosions were reported around the city, and out of the woodworks, ISIS actually got bombed today by the Taliban inside of southern Afghanistan, which I didn't expect that one coming around the corner, but I don't think any of y'all did either. So we'll be making sure to cover all of this news that we have from around the world, starting with our largest stories first, and then moving our way on down into the smallest stories throughout the night. And starting off with our largest stories of the day, we are going to be moving to the Belarusian-Ukrainian border, as it does appear that the two sides are preparing to get into open blows with each other over the ongoing tensions and rising escalations between the two countries. To give a little bit of background explanation as to why this isn't just popping up out of the blue, the state of Ukraine has been explaining, according to their intelligence agencies, that there is clear and evident proof that the Republic of Belarus is attempting to either scale an invasion force of their own onto the border in northern Ukraine to be able to launch an invasion from that direction, or they're going to be allowing the Russian Federation to move in their own forces, stage within the southern areas of Belarus, and then conduct an offensive into northern Ukraine from that direction, from the Republic of Belarus's territory. This has led to Ukraine getting into significantly more increased tensions with the Republic of Belarus, as the Republic of Belarus has once again played the static game that they're known for quite well at this point in foreign policy, and saying they're friends with the Russians, they're not really that much of a friend with the Russians, they're just kind of neutral with them, they like them, they don't really like them, we're not going to attack Ukraine, we might attack Ukraine, and as of today, it appears that the Belarusians are now making the claim, leaning more heavily into they are going to respond to the Ukrainians and conduct some form of military action, which now appears to become the more hardline statement of any that we've seen so far that looks to be what Belarus is planning to work off of for the next several months, possibly as a justification for a casus belli, which is the Latin phrase for a reason for war with the state of Ukraine. As we did get to hear today that Belarus has officially started threatening Ukraine, saying it reserves the right to take measures against Ukraine to protect its citizens' lives after a bus incident in the Bryansk region. Earlier, Russia blamed Ukraine for the June 17th bus attack that killed one Belarusian woman and injured several people, including children. However, Ukraine's security service released intercepted Russian documents showing no Ukrainian drones were detected in the area at that time, suggesting a false flag operation to drag Belarus into the conflict. If it is a false flag operation, it's one of the weakest that we've seen so far, as it doesn't even appear that the Russian Federation is really that adamant on saying that this was really a Ukrainian drone. The Ukrainians have flat out denied that they would attack a bus of any type, and we have never seen any video or picture evidence from the Russians or the Ukrainians for that matter over the course of the war showing that any of their frontier Ukrainian medium-range drone strikes have ever hit buses for that matter, which means that this is a very questionable sort of an incident, and one that we have absolutely no proof off of, or at least a running track record to show that the Ukrainians would ever go out of their way to target and attack any form of a civilian bus. However, this
Also, just to go a little bit further on that allegation that Belarus is making, by the way, I did repost a thing here, a post off of Twitter from United24 about this. There is a picture of the bus, and also, by the way, do not scroll down to the third reply on that tweet, by the way, if you're going to show it, because it does get a little bit graphic down there. But the bus itself is largely intact for the most part. Like you can see here in the picture, the windshield's still fine, the front of the bus is fine. There are some blown out windows on the bus, but there's no pictures of any, deceased individuals on the bus that's been published. So the Ukrainians are claiming that their SBU intercepted documents showing that the Russians planned this situation right here to make it look like Ukraine did it, and they intentionally blew up their own bus so that way they could frame Ukraine, which wouldn't be beyond the Russians, by the way. They've done stuff like that before, but there is a bus that was hit. It's just unclear who the hell even hit it. It's unclear, if there were how many deceased people were on board the bus. It's not really clear. Nothing's clear, really.
Also, the fact that this is clearly a civilian bus is leading us with a great deal of questions, largely to the idea of why in the world would this even be believed to be a Ukrainian drone? Not to say that the Ukrainians have not accidentally hit, due to electronic warfare interference, apartment buildings in Moscow, which we have seen on film in prior days, but we have never seen a Ukrainian FPV drone under the control of an operator ever go out of its way to target and hit a civilian bus of any type. We've never seen any Russian footage to corroborate that claim that we've been able to talk about here on air, and we've never seen any Ukrainian footage showing them hitting civilian vehicles either, unless they're involved in the transportation of military cargoes such as fuel and other bulk goods on the M14 highway inside of southern Ukraine. So it is very unlikely, from what we can tell at the moment, not entirely out of the question, but still highly unlikely, that the armed forces of Ukraine conducted the attack on the 17th of June on the bus inside the Bryansk Oblast. However, it is not stopping the Belarusians from making the claim and pushing forward the idea that this may allow them to enter the conflict, a justification of a sort to enter the war against Ukraine because of the alleged attack that the Ukrainians conducted on the bus in Belarus. The Ukrainians have decided in turn to not take this lightly and in fact push back as hard as possible against the Belarusians, which appears to be, from what we can tell right now, a measured response, but a very strong one to say the least. The Ukrainians have given the following ultimatum by the office of the President Volodymyr Zelensky. I'm not offended by Lukashenko's words, but along the border regions with Ukraine, there is equipment that adjusts fire on the Ukrainian population. I give it a week to withdraw it, or otherwise we'll do it, stating that either the Belarusians withdraw armed forces that are being used to corroborate targeting data for the Russian Federation and Russian drone and missile strikes, and if they do not do that within the week, the Ukrainians will openly destroy the equipment with their own drone strikes right across the Belarusian border, which technically at that point will be an act of war against the Republic of Belarus. And this is largely the Ukrainians making it incredibly clear that either the Belarusians back off of even being involved slightly in the conflict, or the Ukrainians are going to drag them into the conflict, even if they don't want that. And there is a good reason to believe at the moment that this is actually a fairly measured sort of a response and a fairly measured threat that has a decent amount of strategic implications behind it, which we'll get into here in a minute. But before we get to that, I do want to make sure that we address what all of y'all are thinking right now about this Ukrainian ultimatum that has been given, and we also have a great deal more to add on to it after this poll. But Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so right now we're seeing that Zelensky is giving a very concrete ultimatum to Belarus that they'll either have to remove the Russian equipment from the northern part of the border with Ukraine inside of Belarusian territory, or Ukraine will remove it themselves, according to what Zelensky said, meaning they'll attack inside of Belarusian territory to remove that equipment. So what are your thoughts? 58% said Ukraine will attack Belarus. They're not bluffing. 26% said Belarus will end up caving and removing the equipment, and 10% said Ukraine is only bluffing Belarus on the entire situation. And ultimately, here's my thing. Belarus likes to claim that they're not involved in this war, but there's a big problem. If they've set up radio repeaters along the entire border to allow Russia to use their drones to target civilians, that is clearly being involved in the war at that point. So I would say that Belarus has basically committed an act of war against Ukraine by setting up those repeaters, and it seems like Zelensky is taking it that way because he's basically willing to go to war with Belarus over that situation, which honestly I don't blame him really, because if Belarus is going to jump in the fray, then they're fair game at that point. So I don't think Ukraine's bluffing. That's not Ukraine's style to bluff like that. When they say they're going to do something, they actually do it almost all the time. So I'm with the 58%. I think Ukraine will attack them if they don't remove it, and I don't see Lukashenko removing that equipment, because if he does that, he's going to piss Putin off very badly, and that's going to be very bad for Lukashenko. It could be worse than getting at odds with Zelensky. So I'm going to say I think Ukraine's going to go for it, and I think Belarus is going to meet them at the head. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I would be with the 58%. The Ukrainians are planning on attacking the Belarusians if they do not follow through with the Ukrainian demands, and there's actually a very considerably important reason why the Ukrainians are doing this right now than any other time, and also it's actually pretty decent sort of a timing as far as the threat is concerned. Belarus's military does not operate independently. It is actually a subordinate part of the Russian army in reality. And to give you all a little bit of an explanation into that, because that doesn't really sound like it makes a whole lot of sense on the face of it, but if I explain it to y'all, it certainly will. Back after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Lukashenko became the dictator of Belarus by default and has remained the dictator ever since. However, he has leaned heavily, especially ever since Putin has become the president of the Russian Federation, on integrating Belarus and Russia in basically every way but name. So Belarus does exist as an independent country, but militarily there has been a significant amount of treaties and military reforms that have been conducted over the years, particularly in 2011, which completely deleted most of the Belarusians' independent control of their armed forces and largely made it subordinated to the Russian First Guards tank army in the Russian Federation, meaning that Belarus's armed forces are designed and operated not as an actual independent fighting force with well-rounded combined arms capabilities, It is built entirely as a support force to the Russian Federation, conducting operations on their own home soil. Right now, there is not a lot of Russian units in Belarus, and if I show y'all here the quality and makeup of some of these units that are within the Republic of Belarus, it becomes blatantly clear, at least from what we publicly know, and from what I can tell, the Wikipedia does include most of the up-to-date information about their forces and their organization. If you look through it, there's not really a lot to speak of that actually would be, say, a defensive or offensive force within the Belarusian military. If we look, for example, down here within the Western Operational Command, we have 2 mechanized brigades, and every single thing outside of those 2 mechanized brigades, if you'll notice, is some sort of a support brigade or a support regiment. There are artillery brigades and artillery regiments, engineering brigades, communications regiments, maintenance centers, storage bases, electronic warfare battalions, combined armed training ground units, navigation and topographic units, separate guard and service battalions, and material support brigades within the Western Operational Command, which largely commands the southern border near to Ukraine. If you look at that, in reality, the Belarusians actually only have 2 mechanized brigades to put up against the Ukrainians in the whole south of their country. Everything else is support, and support units will collapse if the mechanized brigades that are stopping the enemy from advancing right on the support units don't exist. So in reality, the Belarusians actually do not have really any offensive or defensive capabilities to speak of. And if you look at all of these units, for example, in the Northwestern Operational Command, say that they threw all of them down in the south if a war started, it is the very same structure. They have 2 mechanized brigades in the Northwestern Operational Command, and then everything else is an artillery brigade, comms, radio engineering, electronic intelligence, and the like. There's quite literally nothing to speak of here that is really offensive or even defensive in nature significant enough to stop the Ukrainians from just getting the jump, largely on the Belarusians if the Russians are not present. The Belarusians also only operate, to show you all how interconnected they are with the Russians, the Belarusians only operate in military exercise when there is a larger Russian combat contingent present in Belarus, and they only operate in the war games and exercises that are conducted on Belarusian territory as a support force to the Russians that are in Belarus. So in every sense of the word, unless the Russian army is not in Belarus, Belarus largely only has a policing force or an army on paper that really can't do anything independently on its own.
There is a bit of a problem, though. There is a bit of a risk to this. Like, let's say Ukraine follows through and they end up attacking the border of Belarus to take out the equipment on the border, which, by the way, just to reiterate, the equipment that Zelensky's referring to are radio repeaters. They're the same type of things that we see on the Ukrainian front lines. You'll see the Ukrainian drones taking them out in the treetops. That is a radio repeater, and that's what Belarus is setting up along the entire border, according to the Ukrainians. So there's a bit of a problem, though, because recently Putin revised the doctrine which placed Belarus under the Russian nuclear umbrella. So technically, Belarus is protected by Russian nukes at this point. Not to mention that there's been a lot of reporting out there claiming that Belarus now possesses tactical nuclear warheads on their territory. It's unclear if it's under Lukashenko's control or under Putin's control. I would imagine that it's probably still under Putin's control, but there is a nuclear element to it. Now, would Putin start launching nukes at Ukraine immediately over Belarus getting attacked at their radio repeaters on the border? I would highly doubt that, but of course, that will be a threat that gets lobbed around probably immediately by the Belarusians, as they have nukes and they might be willing to use them. I'm sure they'll probably try to hype that up to scare the Ukrainians off. But Enforcer, what do you think about that? Because that's a pretty big prong of the issue.
I would say that generally, I don't think that the nuclear threat would be that much of an issue or the extension of a nuclear umbrella to Belarus, because the Ukrainians would most likely be keeping their military operations very limited to the near border regions in Belarus, and if there were any long-range strikes, they would be conducted with drones only, and I don't really see the Ukrainians wanting to expend the manpower and munitions to conduct a full-blown open offensive into Belarus with the intent of collapsing the entire Belarusian government. I would say that that's fairly unlikely, so any Ukrainian operations will stay fairly limited in scope and generally around the Ukrainian border areas. And with that in mind, there really isn't a way for Belarus to respond in any sort of an extreme sense, like, say, nuclear, if they did have nuclear weapons under their possession, which we do have decent reason to believe, at least right now, that they might. There really wouldn't be a proper ground or a cause for them to do such a thing. Not only that, this also gears the position, especially knowing that that is the Ukrainian position, that the Belarusians stand to gain nothing and lose a lot if they do not follow through with what the Ukrainian demands are. If the Belarusians try and enter the conflict, they only can enter the conflict with Russian armed forces taking up the vanguard of military operations against Ukraine with the Belarusians in support. And if the Russians don't have the manpower to spare to send into Belarus, then Belarus is basically a sitting duck for whatever the Ukrainians are about to do to them. And so that means that they're going to be open to basically getting blown off the map. And I think that at that point, they probably back off, especially considering that the Russians don't seem to be moving any significant units into Belarus right now. They might just back off and adhere to Ukrainian demands to avoid getting into the conflict, because their situation would be hopeless if they did.
Yeah, there's also another concern that I have about the situation as well. I wonder if maybe this is bait that Putin is trying to do to force Ukraine, or also sort of encourage Ukraine to actually aggress against Belarus. Because imagine this. Do you think Putin would like to put troops inside of Belarus, but he's a little bit concerned what NATO might do about that if they see a Russian troop deployment start building up inside of, basically right on NATO's border inside of Belarus? I'm sure NATO wouldn't be too fond of that, especially if it was out of the blue. They wouldn't be too fond about that. But under the pretext of Ukraine attacking Belarus, even on their border with just the repeaters, that could give Putin a justification to send Russian forces into Belarus and then put the troops basically, right on NATO's doorstep to a large degree, under the guise of protecting their ally. That could be part of it. So I was wondering that earlier today. I was thinking, hopefully this isn't bait, because, obviously Ukraine wants to get rid of those repeaters. And by the way, I see people asking, well, what is it? What's a repeater? It's simply basically extending the range of the signal, getting to these drones, by the way. All these drones that Russia launches into Kyiv, and like, for example, hitting that monastery inside of Kyiv, all these drones are being repeated. The signal is being strengthened so it has farther range on the signal via these repeaters that are on the Belarusian border. That's what those are all about. So it's actively facilitating the attacks on the Ukrainian civilians. That's why Zelensky's so angry about it, is because it's obviously, directly impacting the war and also the deaths inside of Ukraine. So I'm a little bit on the fence about the bait part. And Forster, what do you think about that?
It's possible, but I have a feeling that it'd be a little bit difficult to pull off in reality, because the Belarusians have no actual infantry units to speak of, really, rather than their 4 infantry brigades, which are the only purpose-built ones in the whole of the Belarusian military. If Ukraine even puts up 6 of their own brigades, which I would assume they definitely have that manpower to spare, against the Belarusians, they would be able to start overwhelming them pretty easily and largely open Belarus wide open, hypothetically, to the Ukrainians marching straight to Minsk, and nothing would really stop them. And with that kind of a strategic situation in the conventional sense in play, the Belarusians would request, seeing that they're a CSTO member, which is the Russian equivalent of NATO, that Russian armed forces are deployed into Belarus in a defensive against the Ukrainian forces. So if the Russians did move in, they would largely not be going up against NATO. They'd more so be trying to go up against the Ukrainians themselves, because the Ukrainians would be posing an imminent threat at that point if the Russians just moved in and didn't engage in the fighting of overwhelming the few Belarusian infantry brigades there are and pushing on into Belarus in a hypothetical scenario. So they really wouldn't be able to hang out at Hrodna, because the supply lines might be cut to Hrodna if they just left the Belarusians to it down in the south. So they would have to get in there and get in the fighting alongside the Belarusians against the Ukrainians. The thing about that, though, that I don't think we've talked about a lot on air, and I really wanted to get to here, is that if the Ukrainians get the jump first, the Russians don't get to base their forces and build up their offensive plans in a perfect, sterile environment where there is no active fighting in that area. If the Ukrainians get the jump first and go to war with Belarus first, the Russians are having to run in, basically with their pants down, tripping over each other through Bryansk to try and get into the southern front of Belarus to fight against the Ukrainians. And that means that there's going to be humongous columns of vehicles either moving down the highway or moving by rail into Belarus or towards Belarus that Ukrainian drones could attempt to attack and destroy, and there would also be a significant amount of discoordination and also a decrease of efficiency in Russian armed forces, considering that they would basically be running into the battle unprepared and just trying to set up some sort of defensives to stop any Ukrainian momentum that could be offensively had at that point in that hypothetical scenario. So I'd actually say that in many ways, the Ukrainians Ukrainians are trying to play a bit of a master chess move, if we want a 5D chess move, if we want to call it that, because either the Belarusians accept the Ukrainian demands and they remove the repeaters from the border, or the Ukrainians actually go to war with them, the Belarusians are going to be helpless, and the Russians are going to run in half-cocked and get blown away by Ukrainian drone forces. Because we've seen that whenever the Russians move in half-cocked anywhere, the drones are far more effective against those disorganized forces than they are against organized and aware forces that would already be on an active front.
Yeah, I don't think there's any chance that Belarus is able to defend themselves against a Ukrainian incursion or any type of attack. Belarus is going to be largely helpless. I'm just mainly worried about what the Russian response is going to look like, because there's a lot of options that Putin has at his disposal over something like that. So there's no telling. And also, there's no way to know how Lukashenko is going to act either. He could start maybe backing down, perhaps. That's a possibility. But I guess we'll just have to see. But I did put up a poll just now, though, about the situation about possibly having this baited into the attack on Belarus. So we'll see what people think about that here in just a second.
And we certainly will. In the meantime, we have been able to get even further statements from Zelensky on the situation, as we were able to hear outside of this duplicate of if Lukashenko doesn't remove the repeaters, we will. We were able to then hear a longer statement directly from Volodymyr Zelensky issued on his Twitter about Belarus, regarding Belarus, quite literally is the title. When the full-scale war began, we were hit by missiles that killed children and adults, and Alexander Lukashenko knows this. A large number of missiles were launched from Belarus. Back then, he called, apologized, and said it was out of his control. I don't believe that, but that's what he already said. Now Russia will keep pushing him further into this war. Now he understands that Ukraine will respond. There's no need for extra words. There are retransmitters on his communication towers, on his territory, along the two regions bordering Ukraine. There is equipment that adjusts fire on our people. He should remove that equipment. I think a week is enough for him to do that, because right now, every day, our civilians are being killed, and children are being wounded as a result of this. If he doesn't do it, we will. The same goes for his oil refining sector. For example, we're doing everything so that Russia doesn't have the ability to sell oil and supply diesel and fuel to their army. Today, Belarus is one of the key suppliers for the Russian army. Can this be stopped? I'm sure it's within his power, and he's the one who controls it. As for the drone strike on a bus with Belarusian children, everybody's already acknowledged it. International experts, and it seems even the Russians are admitting it wasn't our strike. The Russians will resort to all sorts of provocations to drag the Belarusian people into this war. This is one of them. And then we were able to see that this went on a little bit further in a couple of additional posts, as this is only one of three, but this got out most of the important points basically at the very start. The Ukrainians are denying any involvement in the Bryansk bus attack. They're saying that basically everybody involved is denying the involvement of the Ukrainians for the larger part, and the Belarusians better be careful about what their next steps are, because if they do not remove the repeaters from the border, not only are the repeaters at risk of getting blown up, but the entirety of the Belarusian oil refining sector could also be at risk of destruction as well. And it actually appears that we just got news out of the Crimean Bridge area at this moment. So Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so also, by the way, just to make the clarification, it's not the Kerch Bridge. It's simply the bridges connecting Crimea with the occupied Ukrainian territories. But right now, NASA firm satellite information of the fire data is showing that the Henichesk-Arabat Bridge, which connects those two different territories, has apparently detected a fire signature on the location of the bridge. So it looks like, my guess is, the Russians try to move another pontoon bridge into place, and it looks like the Ukrainians have hit it yet again. So I'm pretty sure we'll probably be getting footage in the next few hours of another pontoon bridge being taken out that was connecting the logistics to Crimea into the occupied territory. So once again, it looks like they've conducted another attack. I would not be surprised to see the other bridges get hit for probably, I don't even know what round this is at this point, like the fourth or fifth round of attacks on these bridges. They've been hitting these for well over a week.
They've been hitting them quite a lot, like a load, as a matter of fact, recently. And it looks like they're making sure that even the smaller bridges leading into the Henichesk spit near to Henichesk are being destroyed, because it appears that the fires right now are coming from this little area right here around this bridge crossing. So we'll be waiting to see if we get any further information out of that area at the moment. But it does look like there were additional strikes on the Henichesk bridges. With that in mind, and moving us on and into our final statement by Volodymyr Zelensky, we were able to hear at a statement today that he made that he also added that when Lukashenko says that he does not want to be dragged into this war, then he should be honest, at least with his own people. Because it is not he who can be dragged into the war, it's his entire country that can be dragged into the war by Russia. And that's the statement that he made today, I believe in France, if I'm not mistaken, or Belgium. I'm not entirely sure where he was today, but he did make that statement largely reportedly adding in once again that the Ukrainians will not hesitate in entering into a conflict with the Republic of Belarus if it is found necessary for national security. We've also been able to hear that the Republic of Poland today has also put out their own statements stating that they are concerned about Russian attacks, as the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk warned that Russia could carry out serious provocations against Poland, including cyber attacks, drone strikes, and attacks on critical infrastructure. Tusk said some European leaders have privately confirmed information about possible Russian actions, adding that Poland is preparing for all possible events, showing that once again the Polish believe that the possibility of war in Eastern Europe is still remaining fairly high for the by and large. In the meantime, however, a lot of people are still talking about this situation between Ukraine and Belarus, and if the Russians are attempting to try and bait the Ukrainians into starting a war with the Belarusians. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so like the enforcer said, the question is, do you think Putin is trying to bait Ukraine to attack Belarus so that way Russia has a justification to deploy Russian troops inside of Belarus without too much NATO pushback, then now that they would have a defensive justification for doing so? So 57% said yes, it seems like Russian bait, while 23% said no, Putin is not baiting Ukraine, and 14% said I'm 50-50 on this one. And my honest take is this. The repeaters that Russia set up on the Belarusian border with Ukraine, those have a real purpose. That was not done for bait. Those are intentionally working to extend the range of the Russian drone attacks into Kyiv. That's the reason why they're there. But here's the catch, though. That does not mean that Putin is not going to be opportunistic and use this opportunity to justify putting Russian troops inside of Belarus. I think that he will. That's my guess. I think that Putin will try to do that, probably with the intention of invading Ukraine from the north, like Zelensky's been warning about. He probably won't do a ground invasion on the Baltic states, I would imagine, or at least that he won't do it on Lithuania right this minute, but he might in the future. But I think what he's going to try to do is start an invasion from the north yet again in Ukraine by using this opportunity to deploy those troops. So I'm with the 14%. I'm kind of 50-50 on this one. I think he'll be opportunistic, but it's not set up from the outset to be bait. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that this isn't really bait, because I see a lot of people saying that it's bait so that way Belarus can lob a nuke in Ukraine. But the problem with that is that if Belarus lobs a nuke into Ukraine, now there's a million other extra can of worms than if Russia just did that themselves. One, Belarus doesn't have any way to make a nuclear weapon on their own at all. So that was given to them by the Russians. Now the Russians have not only violated the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty that they are a signing member of, along with China, the United States, Britain, France, India, and Pakistan, but they also just directly nuked Ukraine anyway, so it creates the same result, but now it leads to a possibility that the US, Britain, or France might start handing out nukes to everybody in NATO like their party favors and letting them personally control and operate their own nuclear weapons, which is a significant threat. That will greatly increase the chance of a nuclear conflict, because now even a little country like Estonia could just lob a nuke into Russia if they got scared enough. And that's a world that the Russians really don't want to live in. That's a world the Russians really don't want to die in, to put it properly. So with that in mind, Russia trying to use this as bait so that way Belarus can nuke Ukraine, it doesn't really work, because it basically leads to the same international consequences that the Russians will be trying to avoid by not nuking Ukraine themselves directly. So the only thing that we can say is that if they're trying to bait the Ukrainians into going into war with Belarus, is to try and tie up conventional forces inside of southern Belarus because the Ukrainians went to war with them. And in really no scenario does that end up being in Ukraine's I guess you could say negative outcomes for the larger part, because if the Russians are already planning, like Ukrainian intelligence says, to build up a force inside of southern Belarus and invade northern Ukraine, then the Ukrainians starting the war right now with Belarus and fighting inside of southern Belarus isn't really doing anything at all to hurt them. If anything, it's helping them. Because instead of letting the Russians build up tens of thousands of troops on their northern border for months, sit there in perfect isolation without any attacks being conducted against them, and plan their offensives, and also plan how their units are going to move and how they're going to engage Ukrainian forces, instead, the Ukrainians caught them completely off guard. Now they're fighting the very few mechanized infantry units that the Belarusians have inside their territory, and the Russians are having to race in well ahead of time without any preparation whatsoever, with the very few units that they have left to spare, to be able to try and fight off the Ukrainian invasion that will be happening somewhere around Gomel, most likely. that is leading the Russians in a tactical sense and in a strategic sense to actually be on the back foot strategically in a conventional conflict. So I would have to say that, in my honest opinion, I don't think that this is a trap. I think the Ukrainians are trying to game out the situation to where they come out on top, and apparently they do believe strongly that the intelligence they have that an eventual Russian invasion could be conducted from Belarus is sound, and they're going to try and preempt it before it can even happen.
Also, by the way, another prediction I want to make, if Russia sends troops into Belarus and tries to invade Ukraine from the north, I think that will be a very likely trigger for NATO to get involved directly in this conflict. I think it will be. Now, obviously, the United States won't be in favor of that. They're obviously going to be pushing against it. But I think states like Poland and the Baltics are going to be thinking, well, hell, if Belarus is going to start invading Ukraine, that means Belarus is now a hostile actor in the war, and they're right on our border. So we need to do something about this and stop this before it starts getting worse. I think they'll end up stepping in if that happens. So that might be getting thrown into the equation as well. That would be my guess. I know some people are going to say, well, NATO's not going to do that. They're not going to do that. It's weak. They're too weak to do something like that. But I think they would at that point, because I think they're going to be so scared that now Belarus is jumping in and they're right there on their border that they might actually act.
They possibly could, and we'll have to wait and see, of course, folks, what turns out in the situation and whether this happens at all, because there's also a decent likelihood that Lukashenko might feel threatened enough, and Russia might not be in a good enough strategic position to actually help out Belarus, and so the Russians tell him, look, if Ukraine goes to war with you, we really can't help, and y'all are basically screwed, so just get the repeaters and remove them from the border, because otherwise this is going to end up pretty badly for us. That could also be an outcome as well, and then this whole thing ends up going nowhere, and the Ukrainians get what they want, and a larger conflict doesn't begin with the Belarusians. Or the Belarusians might not withdraw the repeaters, and then they might get their ass beat, which honestly will be something else to watch, because it's not really like they stand a chance. But moving us on out of Belarus and Ukraine, and that major news of the day, we have also been able to hear of some other major news that has come out of the Moscow area. Moscow has come under attack for the third time in a row today, and this attack was about as hilarious as the last one. I gotta say that we're gonna be burning that midnight oil right here to cover this news, because we got some real information, some good information that's come out of this today. After the attacks from yesterday, the Russians have been panicking quite heavily, and they are actually bussing in, or more so flying in, even more air defense systems into Moscow to try and set up to help against the next incoming attack, which is already happening. That right there is a little air defense tower.
А там ребята на крыше ждут.
Yes, put it on top of the roof that probably is not rated to support that kind of weight.
Believe it. Like it's going to go crashing through 10 floors. I'll skip forward a little bit, though, to show y'all where it's heading. There we go.
Будет улетать сейчас.
Looks like it's dropped it off at that point. But moving us on out of that clip, we also were able to see another one showing even more air defense. This time a legitimate road Pantsir S1, just setting up on a highway somewhere or some sort of a construction site, I believe, waiting for more drones to come into Moscow. There it is.
What's it sitting on, like top of a sitting on top of a bridge or something?
It looks like an overpass for an interstate almost, honestly. Like that seems to be where it's at, but I can't really tell for sure.
Yeah, it won't do them any good no matter where it's at, so I guess that's as good of a location as any.
But they did bring in that extra air defense for today. They're really starting to ramp it up even farther. And while that's been going on, there were the drone threats that came out in the following regions just hours ago. Kuban, Moscow, Oriol, Vladimir, Ryazan, Tula, Volgograd, Rostov, Kursk, Lipetsk, Crimea, Kherson, Donetsk, and Luhansk. So the entirety of southwestern Russia and central Russia. In the midst of that, we then were finally able to hear that the drone alert came out in Moscow. And we could see that drone threat right here. I gotta say, they need to change that logo, though. They really need to work better on that one. But moving us on out of that, now it's time for us to get into the business. A large number of flights have been canceled in Moscow due to the ongoing drone attacks, with 130 flights being delayed at the Moscow airports. 59 planes were unable to land or depart at Sheremetyevo, 51 at Viknovo, and 26 at Domodedovo.
And that's on top of the ones, by the way, that were already canceled because they're out of jet fuel. So really, it seems like to me, the Russian airline industry is coming to a screeching halt between the jet fuel shortages and also the drone attacks. Trying to fly somewhere in Russia right now is like a lost cause.
It's a tough day to be in the Russian airline industry these days. It's just never a win for them. In the midst of all that, we then finally started to see that the drones were coming in. Let's take a gander. Why, there's two
Look,
of
a
them.
jet drone. Yeah, a jet drone racing a propeller drone. Look at that.
Wow. That jet drone really is getting that speed going right there. I mean, look at that. I believe that's one of those BARS missiles. Oh.
Oh. Yeah, I think the jet drone is superior.
Just a tad. Here's another clip. I forgot the name of this drone, but that's that new Ukrainian design based off of the Shahed.
I think that's a Maroc.
Barack Obama?
Oh.
Moving aside from that clip, we also got to see more of the clips of the drone taste. This one's largely a duplicate, but getting us into this one's fresh, but only 2 seconds long. We also got this clip. This one almost sounds like a racing drone. It's that little
If
blip.
it sounds really high pitch, that is a Maroc, by the way. That definitely is right there. I know that. If you hear that high pitch sound right there, like the high RPM motor, that's the Maroc. It's a fast version of their propeller drone.
And we also got another clip here. This sounds like a traditional one. Maybe an FP1. Oh yeah, it is.
That's probably the loudest drone that Ukraine fields.
Not that it ever really mattered. It really doesn't matter much. Like, these things are loud as hell, and the Russians still can't shoot them down over the whole 300-mile flight they have in Russia to Moscow. We also got to see this one, the last clip here, which is largely a duplicate of the first, showing us the explosion of the FP1 and the flying of the BARS, which we can largely confirm is a BARS missile. Moving us on from that, we've also been able to hear that within the area of the Kupotnia refinery, there's been more that happened today. Let's take a look at how the refinery is looking this morning. It's still looking bad.
Ukraine has refined their attacks into a fine oil.
Man, we're getting every single reaction to this, like, from around the world. You got like all in the same clip. Like, listen to that. It's literally like the soundboard of every single reaction we've ever heard in the world. I gotta say, I think these guys might be gassed or something. Like they're absolutely on something.
Crazy. And it's like you like we've gone over before, you really can't put the stuff out. Like once you bring in the helicopters with the water buckets, you can try to do that, but trying to put out a fire of this magnitude, you basically got to let the thing burn out. And in this case, letting it burn out means putting millions of gallons of carcinogens into the atmosphere that's going to rain down on the civilians over Moscow. So it's a lose-lose situation for the Russians.
And you know, the Russians, folks, they're very used to abuse to the liver, but they're not very familiar with abuse to the lungs as much. That's something that's different territory for them. Man, damn. Outside of that, we then saw that there were more manpads being fired in Kyiv today. It appears that this was actually today, not yesterday. So, once again, remind you, all this is from the drone attack that happened for the third time today.
In Kyiv?
Oh, in Kyiv?
You mean in Moscow?
Oh, did I say Kyiv?
Yeah, you said Kyiv. I was like, in Kyiv. I was like, well, Kyiv didn't get attacked.
I'm
I was like,
sorry.
what's going on?
I'm so sorry, everybody. I just had a Bushism. This is Moscow.
Look at this dude film. That looks like a cadaverite.
Kind of does. Man, hopefully they get it.
Oh.
They didn't. It missed.
Oh, man. If they can't shoot down a propeller drone, do they really expect to hit the jet drone? I would say probably not. Whatever, if that's the manpads that Russia gave to Iran, Iran's lucky as hell they got the thing to work, because I haven't seen a manpad hit anything yet that they've been firing on the sides of the highways.
Man, Russia just gave Iran like the biggest win we could ever had in the war. They just got given a whole bunch of lemons. Like I think if that was what the Russians gave Iran, which would be the Strela, we were in pretty good business to continue that war on. I don't think they would have shot down another aircraft again. They would have just missed them all. But we also did get to see more clips of the drones coming in today here. You can see the oil smoke in the air, nice and thick.
Yes.
Oh. Why, that one's unique. I've never seen that before. Are you sure that's like a totally different airfoil?
I'm positive that's a Maroc drone right there.
There's no way that that's Maroc Hussein. Like, there's no way. Like, that's impossible. Like, how do you spell that name again? An M-A-R-A-K?
M-O-R-O-K.
Let me go pull this up here really quickly. We got to go find this. Oh, yeah, this one is. But the other one, though, it's not that one. Like, the one that we've seen, this one actually is. Like, this is what it looks like. Or at least that's the 3D model someone made of it. But the other one that we saw looked more like a Shahed. You know what I mean? With, like, the stubbier nose and everything. Yeah. We covered it yesterday.
Yeah, you're talking about the Shahed ripoff. You're correct. Like that one that I said was a Maroc earlier. One of those was the Shahed knockoff, but it had a very similar sounding motor to the Maroc. Also, by the way, the thing that's so unique about the Maroc, this is not a Maroc, by the way. What are they calling this one right here? What's the name of it?
Sitchin.
That's a strange name, the Sitchin. But the Maroc though that we're watching in our current video right now, the special part about that is that thing goes extremely fast. It goes 300 kilometers per hour. And hop back to that picture, that video of the one we're talking about for a second, the Maroc. Yeah, right there. So that Delta Wing looking thing right there, that is the Maroc, and it goes very fast. In this video right here, it's going a fraction of the speed, its top speed right here in the video. It's only going a fraction of it. That thing can really book it. It can go as fast as a jet drone for the most part.
I got to say, it is something. It's something, you know, when you look at them. But yeah, we have to remember, folks, that this thing is also out there in decent numbers these days. And I think you said earlier that this thing, the Sitchin, was a Maroc, and that's why I was like, "Are you sure?" Because I was like, that thing looks like this, and that was a Sitchin. This one definitely is a Maroc, though. I mean, unrecognizably, definitely the case. But let's watch this one and what it does today. Oh, they tried to shoot it down, and they missed. Bro, they're missing left and right. Oh, there's the lid. Oh,
there went the lid. There went the lid. Man, that proves it, by the way. Also, by the way, I saw some people saying, guys, you didn't know the Russians were the ones that shot their own tank. We covered that yesterday, by the way. The dude covering it today is a little bit late to the party. But this thing right here, it was literally the Russian manpad that hit their own oil tank, and they were trying to shoot down the Maroc when they hit it.
Man, sad days for the Russians. I mean, absolutely pitiful. We also got another clip here. One more to show y'all. The Russians are spraying so much foam onto this fire that it's actually raining down with the oil now from the sky. The foam, that is.
It's raining down everything but rain. Like they're getting foam, they're getting oil, they're getting carcinogens, but they're getting no precipitation.
Next thing you know, it'll be raining kitchen sinks up there in Moscow. Definitely not a good look for them. We also were able to hear inside of Moscow today that, according to the rat, Dmitry Peskov, he stated today that, according to him, Russian air defenses performed well during the latest Ukrainian drone attack on Moscow, the largest since World War II. Let me go back. Let me show you something real quick.
I'm sorry. Wait a minute. He said the air defenses are working the best since World War II. Are you telling me they had drones in World War II?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, like, you know, that was like a common thing. You know, like the German super weapons, plenty of them. I mean, like, you know, they had more advanced drones than even the Ukrainians have.
Man, I tell you what, the Russians were shooting down the Glock, that wonder weapon that Germans had. They were shooting that down over Moscow with their air defense, apparently, according to the rat.
And I want y'all to keep in mind, you know what, let me get this guy on the screen, on the side screen here, and let me play the audio for y'all to hear really quickly, so that way y'all can hear this and then watch what actually happened. So here you go.
Действительно, дроновые атаки продолжаются. Принимаются меры, соответствующие по ликвидации последствий. Высокие показатели работы систем ПВО, несмотря ни на что. Что касается президента...
That doesn't really line up with effective air defense, does it? Like, does it?
Man. Also, Peskov said today, he said, don't watch the videos of the destruction, like the lid video right here. If you want a good life, don't watch the videos. Just simply go home and bury your head in some propaganda and watch the Ukrainian attack videos instead for good times. That's what he said.
Yeah, he actually said that. Like, here, I'll have to take this one off screen as well, sadly, folks. I'll just read you all the subtitles, though, of what he said. And I'll actually bring it back as a treat, of course, back to the dome blowing up down there, because it is, of course, something else to see. So here's the clip again. I'm going to play this for y'all on the main screen and read y'all what Peskov said on the side. So here we go. As for the president, he talks slow as hell. He receives reports regularly, several times a day, and at any times, if necessary. Look more for footage from various cities across Ukraine. The footage is impressive, showing the results of our armed forces strikes. The Kyiv regime is in a very difficult position. The situation on the front lines will soon become completely catastrophic for them. I don't think so. I mean, like, kind of watching this whole thing on loop right here on screen, I don't think the Ukrainians are in a bad spot right now. I think that's just more so the rat speaking, and I would say that the rat only needs to be taken as far as the cheese that you put on the trap. But moving us on from that, we have one last bit of news out of Moscow from today, as we have been able to hear that Gazprom stocks have hit the lowest levels ever since 2008. Oh!
Damn.
Their stocks, folks, have hit $1 per share.
Is that what that turns into when you convert it to dollars?
It's $1.05, but it is $1 a share.
It looks like, according to this chart that they're showing here on this tweet from War Translated, it looks like it was low for quite a while, actually. This is a yearly chart we're looking at right here. I mean, it's been at this level before. This has not been doing great for a while, actually. It goes all the way back to 2009.
Man, 2009 wasn't that, well, 2008 more so, was not that good of a year. But I'd say that this year is looking worse. And, that's pretty bad when you see the oil company that's just kind of been hanging on by a thread, it seems, in the stock values, is now going on a final plunge to doom at this point. And it's been kind of doing that for decades now. But anyways, moving us on out of that little bit of news in the area of Moscow, I think we're all getting the idea that it's just not looking too well, it's not really looking that good. And a lot of people are talking about those jet drones, like those BARS missiles that were being used on Moscow. They said that the Ukrainians were firing harms and slinging bars at the Russians, and really, honestly, it's actually accurate. They actually have both of those missiles. But outside of that, a lot of people are wondering, what in the world is Putin going to be doing about this one? Is he going to be, Putin up a storm? What's he going to do? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so what Ukraine is doing right now is they've launched their third biggest attack on Moscow in just the last 72 hours alone. That is significant because they've literally been bombarding the Moscow civilians and the government and authorities with these drone attacks, and largely Russia has been unable to defend against it, and there's no sign they're going to suddenly start defending. It looks like they're going to keep failing. So what's going to happen? Because obviously it seems like something's about to break, but what do you think is going to happen? 35% said Putin will simply suppress any dissent inside the Kremlin. And 33% said the Moscow citizens will turn on Putin, and 26% said Putin will start a distraction somewhere, like, for example, the Belarus situation or something like that, to get the focus off of Moscow and move it somewhere else. And me personally, I think that Putin will simply start suppressing dissent. He's already tried to do that with the internet suppression that he tried about a month ago, and he knew that he needed to get a grip on it, but he was unable to do so. But what we're seeing today as well, that we'll get into here probably very shortly, is we're already seeing the Russians try to suppress the people releasing these videos of these attacks in Moscow. They're already trying to suppress that because they know the more of those videos that get out and the more Russian civilians that see that, they're going to start getting freaked out and panicked. And when people start getting panicked, they usually start running at the mouth quite often. So I think that's what Putin's going to do. You'll probably see a crackdown inside of Moscow that probably takes precedence over the air defense situation, because that's what matters most to Putin, is keeping the minions in line for the most part. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that they're probably just going to suppress dissent and try and pretend that the situation is fine. That is the quintessential Soviet/Russian move in the modern day, is when things go bad and there's an absolute disaster or a catastrophe, just deny it, completely lie that it even happened at all, and everything will be fine. They are definitely going to be getting into suppressing dissent, however, as it does appear that they are now picking their enemy from within now to try and suppress, which is apparently the migrants in Russia, speaking of which.
There's that dude I was like talking about last night, bro. Click on that picture. Let's see that larger right here.
Blood was over stemmy to hell.
He was running from the Russian manpath first. Then he pointed up at the sky right here and said, "Look, it's a Ukrainian drone." You can tell that dude's actually legitly scared like shitless right there. You can tell by the look in his eyes. He is like legit scared shitless, running around right there. Also, still have no idea. I'm going to bring this up again tonight. What was this dude doing on the highway? What was he doing here? We'll never know. But you can tell though, this dude was clearly freaked out.
You know, definitely. Definitely, without a doubt, this guy was freaked out. But the Russian war bloggers have started to identify a new enemy in the aftermath of the Ukrainian drone attacks in Moscow, which are the migrants, pictured here, who have appeared in many videos of the strikes. They are calling for severe punishments of those who have violated the government's censorship regulations. So it looks like they're trying to find their new public enemy number one, and it's now anybody who isn't a Russian that's in Russia. This is going to pose a little bit of a problem, however. Many people here in America are kind of told this whole propaganda story about how Russia is generally for Russians. There aren't any foreigners that live inside the Russian Federation in any large numbers, and if they do, they're told that they're not welcome and they need to go back to where they came from. That's not actually the case, though. In the reality of the Russian Federation, they have lost so many men in Ukraine that they have actually had to funnel in millions of migrant laborers, usually from places like India and Pakistan, Central Africa, and elsewhere, to be able to fill in the labor pool that it now no longer exists inside of Russia. Because of this, if you go and look at any videos that Russian military bloggers or any Russian bloggers put out, you will see a significant amount of migrant workers inside the Russian Federation. And the problem is that if they try and crack down on this group, which usually would mean that they're going to deport them for whatever crimes they've committed and return them back to wherever they came from, they're going to start knocking out millions of people that they had to bring in to replace the workforce that they've lost because of the casualties they've sustained in the war. So it's largely a lose-lose situation for the Russians. Either they let them continue to film the stuff, or they start mass deporting a load of these migrant laborers that they brought in, and then they start losing millions of workers in the manpower pool that they will now be seeing as a significant shortage. There aren't any Russians to replace them, that's why they're there, so I'd have to say, it's not really looking too good for them. Also looking like they're not really living up to that propaganda maxim that they were always talking about in Russia. Kind of a little odd how they don't live what they preach, you know, interesting. But anyways, moving us on from that, we also were able to see that the Russians are trying to figure out, though, how to deplete that labor pool as quickly as they can. Down in Penza today, they've actually set up a checkpoint, and they are stopping any cars with any able-bodied men in them, telling the cars to step out, telling the men to step out of the cars, and the cars to step out of the men, and then putting them in buses and sending them to the front.
I bet they didn't stop the Aston.
Oh, no, he bribed them.
Oh, yeah. Allegedly. But, you know, I bet you don't stop the people with money. Like, that's that, you know, it's blatant in Russia how that works. Like, if you have money in Russia... No, that part's not allegedly. But in Russia, if you have money, if you have status, you get all kinds of perks because they operate like an oligarchy, because they are an oligarchy by every sense of the word. So I'm sure the dude, also, by the way, Safety Green, he's going to make sure that he's going to be seen in this one.
He's visibly here. Moving us on out of that whole deal, they are starting some little mobilizations here and there, you know, forced conscriptions on the street. They call that press ganging in most parts of the world, but in Russia, they call that doing your patriotic duty. Meanwhile, up in Kronstadt, the benevolent and wise Putin the Bald has decided to start issuing bomb shelters throughout Kronstadt Island. This is because the last attacks showed that the town of Kronstadt, near to the Baltic Sea Fleet's naval headquarters and main port, is generally unequipped to deal with Ukrainian attacks. So they've decided to put these out. They're literally concrete boxes that you walk into, and hopefully it protects you against attacks. That's all it is. But they're putting loads of them out there in Kronstadt right now. I mean, there's like a dozen of them out there right now. Also, by the way, if y'all don't know, Kronstadt looks like a hellhole, so I don't really think a Ukrainian drone attack will be doing anything to hurt the image of Kronstadt, say, because, if you look at it, I mean, this is Kronstadt, so, I mean, like, what is a Ukrainian drone attack really going to do to a place like this?
Yeah, I don't know really. Those shelters they keep putting out here, like those concrete, just like blocks, basically that are hollowed out. It's like, does that really work? It's like, is there even a door on the front of it? Because it looks like it's just like a hole at the front of the box where you just walk into. It's like, is there anything even shielding you from the front entrance?
Not really. I mean, if something blows up at the front of it, you're just kind of screwed. I mean, all the shrapnel is going to fly straight in through the open door. So the answer is no. I mean, like, you just kind of hope the explosion happens not in front of the door.
Yeah, really. It seems like a lot of people were saying the chat looks like a concrete vault. It really seems like that, like more like a coffin. Really, to the most part, is there's not really a whole bunch protecting you. Like, for example, let's say Ukraine launched a whole bunch of FPV drones from the balloons that they've recently started doing. Let's say they do that in Moscow and they go around looking for people. Not that they would hit civilians intentionally, but just making a point here. The one of those drones could go straight into that concrete box. Like, even if Russian forces were hiding in there and they're finished, there's nothing protecting you.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really that much of an effective defense. It's the cheapest sort of a bomb shelter that could ever be made, just so that way they can say that they're putting them out there. But moving us on out of this whole area of Eastern Europe for a minute, and generally out of the whole of Europe, and moving us on down into the Middle East, we do have some interesting news and developments coming out of this area today as well. But before we get on into all of those interesting developments that have come out of the Middle East and the rest of the news that we have from the war in Ukraine, I do want to say a huge thanks to everybody who has been watching the show tonight. We are absolutely honored and greatly appreciative to know that at the peak tonight, we've had 17.2 thousand people here, and 73,000 people have watched this stream over just the past hour and 8 minutes. That's quite a lot of people. As a matter of fact, folks, that's actually more people in the first hour of the show tonight than we had yesterday during the first hour. And weirdly enough, we reached like 20,200 live viewers yesterday. I don't really understand how the math is mathing on any of that, but beyond that, we do greatly appreciate each and every single one of y'all being here. Whether YouTube is accurately counting y'all or not, we're not really sure, but we are still happy to have y'all here because we love to know that so many people continue to enjoy this channel as their primary source of news and help us to be able to see that we have folks to tell the news to every day. I hope that we've done well so far tonight. We still have a long ways to go in the news and a lot of crazy developments to speak of, to say the least, out of the Middle East and the rest of Ukraine. But before we get on into that, I do want to take a brief moment to address 3 questions in the chat, and then we're going to be moving on to the rest of the news for the night. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first of the 3 super chats here, and then getting right back to our news. This one goes to none other than Con45, and thank you very much, Con, for that $50 support right there, which is the largest super chat of the night thus far, and we do appreciate that very, very much. And Con said, the 2 Russian soldiers caught on camera with the malfunctioning manpad launchers that ended up sending the top off a Russian oil tank into the ozone layer must be recognized as heroes of Ukraine, and they created a historical video and photo op. And do you agree? I would agree 100%, honestly. But, in reality, I'm sure the Russians are looking for those guys. I'm sure they're looking very, very closely for where they went, because I'm sure that they would love to give them a medal for that. So if they're looking for the migrants, which the Russians are already doing for merely filming the situation, they are almost certainly going to be hunting down those manpad launchers. If it's the Kadyrov, I hope Kadyrov comes along and saves them or something, because I think Putin wants to have a word with them. But Enforcer, what say you?
I actually heard that they were looking to give them metal, as in lead. Not any sort of a military award, just pure lead via the Makarov. But outside of that, though, I would have to say I think that they ought to be awarded. I think that would be something that would actually be pretty hilarious if the Ukrainians could track down the names of those manpad operators and issue out to the 2 that were the most likely ones there that fired off the manpad at the tank. They ought to give them the award Hero of Ukraine, just to rub it in the face of the Russians that they were the ones who blew up the oil tank that created the whole propaganda coup, basically, that the Ukrainians got out of the whole deal. And so I gotta say, a humongous thanks to you for that incredible support, Con45, and helping this channel to keep it running. And I also gotta say, that's a very astute observation there. And if the Ukrainians had any propaganda sense, they'd give those guys a medal, because they truly did the Ukrainians wonders with how they handled them manpads. Also, they ought to give an award, call it the Hero Factory of Strela, the way they produced those manpads so well. They did an amazing job as well. We got to give everybody in Russia a round of applause. We have to give the Russian Ministry of Defense and the Russian National Police a round of applause for how ineffective they were at coordinating. We got to give the manpad factory that produced those manpads a round of applause for producing them so shittily. We got to give the Russian army itself a round of applause for poorly training their fire groups. I mean, there were so many people that failed at every level in Russia for that to even happen that you really got to give the whole of Russia a round of applause. If anyone's going to beat the Russians, it's going to be the Russians. And it's really an amazing thing to know that Russia is on our side against the Russians. But a huge thanks to
don't forget the Kadavarites. Please don't forget them, because remember, the whole reason Ukraine was able to invade into mainland Russia, down there near, what was the area? Kursk it was, I believe they invaded into mainland Russia a while back. The only reason that Ukraine was able to do that is because of the Kadavarites, because they were out for lunch right as the Ukrainians came in to invade. And because they were eating a ham sandwich, Ukraine was able to go into Russian territory and take a whole bunch of it and put Russia on the back foot. Now it could be that if it's proven that the Kadavarites were the ones that allowed that famous picture to be taken inside of Moscow as well, because I would assume they were also out for lunch yet again right when they were needed. So really, the Kadavarites are hungry people. They're hungry. They love to have some more, and they love to let Putin have a lot less.
Man, the Russians were, what the Ukrainians, where are our guys? Meanwhile, the Kadaravites, delicious.
Always out for lunch, those Kadavarites. Whenever they're needed, it's always lunch.
Man, honestly, man, that was the funniest thing ever. I remember when the second-hand man of the Kadaravites literally came out and said, well, we weren't there because we were on lunch. Meanwhile, while you're saying that there was like 200 Kadaravites in a bunker encircled on the border. Remember that? And the Ukrainians were just hammering the bunker that they were all stuck in?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Also, by the way, I see people saying, what the hell is a Kadavarite? If I have it right, that's the special forces of the Chechens, I believe. That's what they are, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's why I thought as well. They're Chechens, so they're obviously from Chechnya, and they're led by Kadyrov, so they're called Kadavarites. So that's who they are right here, by the way. They look a little ragtag, even in their best pictures.
When was this taken? 2004? No wonder. They've gotten much more advanced nowadays. That's what they looked like at the beginning of the war. See, this guy's got a boonie hat now. He's way up there, like way up there compared to 2004. And this guy's got a scraggly beard and what looks like a Baofeng radio. We can see them getting ready for their little propaganda photo op. I mean, it was something else. Here's another picture of them. They really look well equipped. Truth is, folks, these guys suck terribly. They're so bad they don't even let them on the front anymore. Funnily enough, the Russians won't even let them there. Let's see here. Anything else I can show you all about them? Not really. Oh, wait a minute. They do have this little thing, the Akhmat armored car, which is special to them because it's named after their little Akhmat group, and Ramzan Kadyrov and all that. But yeah, that's their little special armored car. That's basically like the only thing unique about their unit. And this thing got blown up like by the dozens in Ukraine. I didn't really see any of them survive going to Ukraine. But anyways, with that, I hope we have addressed that well, at least the best we can. And with that, it's time for us to get on into the second question of the segment.
And our second one here goes to none other than Eric Brown. And thank you very much, Eric, for that $50 support. And we do appreciate that very, very much as well. Very generous of you. He said a bribe for the Artemis 2 retrieval clip in the Navy section of the intro.
Hey, and a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Eric Brown. And I'm very happy to know that you noticed that and appreciated it. I put together the entire Armed Forces medley through DVids, an amazing website that allows you to get all the footage you ever need. And it was one hell of a feat to put that thing together. But I'm happy to know that a lot of people appreciate the visuals that were put with the music, because I tried to make sure that it was an absolute extravaganza of American pride and patriotism on film and music. And I hope that it shows every single night. I thank you, Eric Brown, for that amazing support and appreciating the finer details of the clips that I used to be able to make that intro a reality. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we're on the next one. The last question of the segment.
In our last one of the segments, going to go to Jack Ray. And thank you, Jack, as well, for the $31 support, and we do appreciate it. He said 1960. Oh, he's got a day in history, it looks like. He said 1960, May 1st, the USSR downs a US U-2 spy plane, and an SA-2 SAM shoots down one of its own MiG-20 or MiG-19 fighters, and the USSR self-owning with SAMs since 1960.
And I think that was the one that involved the shoot down of Gary Powers. I'm pretty sure. Yes, it was. It actually was. Let me go to there here real quick. You can actually see that they still have the remnants of that U-2 spy plane in Moscow at the museum. hey, they're still living on that high 60 years later. Sadly, folks, I'd love to say that we have something similar to this in the United States of America, but we've shot down so much Russian shit that it isn't even really worth remembering. Most of it was left in the fields where we shot the stuff down. Not that we shot down direct Soviet aircraft, but we did shoot down their aircraft in other places like Iraq, and, Iran and other places like that. So a little bit interesting, when you come to think of it. And also, let me see if I can show you all the surface-to-air missile that they use. Here it is. The SA-2. It looks old now, but back in the day, this was cutting edge. Actually, this was the first missile that was actually able to reach the U-2 spy plane at high altitude. And so I gotta say, a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And we cannot go, folks, without mentioning the ugliest Soviet aircraft. Well, it's not the ugliest. This would be a bit of an exaggeration. There are others out there that really hold that name, but I've got to show you all one of the ugliest Soviet aircraft that was ever made. This thing did shoot down on the same day. Let me get a picture of it for y'all. Let me get a little picture of it. A good one. Really show it off here. Here we are. The MiG-19. It's kind of ugly. But outside of that, though, yeah, that's the one that they also shot down. The Russians, they're just not good at air defense. But anyways, a big thanks to your support and helping this channel to keep it running, and I hope that does address that incredibly well, Jack Ray. And a big thanks to you once again for helping this channel to keep it running and pointing out another embarrassment of the Soviet Union and the modern-day Russian Federation as well. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again, and it's now time for us, folks, to move on and into the middle of the East. Today, folks, we've been able to hear that the Memorandum of Understanding has continued to deteriorate into a state of collapse, as the Islamic Republic of Iran did announce that they were closing the Strait of Hormuz. This radio broadcast here, which appears to have been issued in Farsi, actually states the following in English. Since Israel's withdrawal from Lebanon and the complete lifting of the naval blockade and the withdrawal of American terrorist forces from the Persian Gulf and the region are among the main conditions of the agreement between Iran and the United States, the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed until these two conditions are met. All ships are ordered not to approach the Strait of Hormuz for their own safety and health. Any vessel that defies this order will be targeted. That was a statement by the IRGC today within the Strait of Hormuz, meaning that as of right now, the Strait of Hormuz is once again closed. We can see that there is shipping traffic moving through the area, however, but according to this claim, the strait is closed. We also were able to see that once again, the Iranians did reiterate today through their foreign ministry that the talks, that says that talks for a permanent deal with the U.S. will only start after these MOU clauses are fulfilled: a permanent end to the war in Lebanon, a complete lifting of the U.S. blockade, the U.S. issuing waivers for Iranian oil, and releasing Iran's frozen assets. So the Iranians are making it clear that they're running the show and that they want their demands met before they ever reopen the Strait of Hormuz, at least according to their claims. We then were able to hear that apparently the Iranians had closed the ship and were firing warning shots at some vessels that were attempting to pass through, and then at the ultimate, I guess you could say, apex of the story here right before we got on air, the Iranians then denied closing the Strait of Hormuz, and the Ministry for Foreign Affairs spokesperson Bakai called the claims baseless and said commercial shipping continues under the June 18th ceasefire memorandum. And generally it appears that is true at the moment, because we are seeing a decent amount of ships using the Iranian toll booth to be able to flow in and out of the area, even on Marine Tracker right now. But we're not entirely sure what was up with all the other reports and the actual radio broadcasts that were recorded in the strait that made it fairly clear that they were going to be shutting down the strait and firing upon any ships that attempted to pass through. We've also been able to see that additionally, in the meantime, the Israelis are still going ham on the Hezbollah forces within southern Lebanon. And we were able to see that there were further airstrikes within the area today, including these right here, which were conducted apparently by the Israeli Air Force. As we can see, their guided explosives landing near to what they claim to be Hezbollah sites in southern Lebanon, striking them and destroying them.
Hezbollah.
Hezbollah.
Oh man, I tell you what, Hezbollah's getting a bit of a thrashing out here, really. But I've seen also, just to be straight up honest, I've seen the Israelis getting a thrashing too. It looks like a couple of their tanks are getting hit again today.
It really does, honestly. We're about to be getting to that here in just a moment, after we get through all of these airstrikes. We were able to see another airstrike in Nabatea today inside of southern Lebanon, and we've also been able to hear that there is a new operation tonight for the Israelis to attempt to take the hill, the Ali al-Tahrir hill, near to the city of Nabatea in southern Lebanon. Right now, they are still engaged in those clashes, and we were able to see a little bit of it right here.
Is the hill where the bunker's at?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think that command post for Hezbollah is probably up there. That's why they were trying to make a run on it.
And we see that they are quite barraging the whole area, the entire zip code. We also were then able to see that an Israeli tank column appears to have been burning in the distance near to the area of the city of Nabatea, and also the Israelis did report today, according to the IDF, that 4 Israeli soldiers of the IDF's tank corps, which is the exact number of crew members inside of a single Merkava Mark IV, were apparently killed last night in a Hezbollah attack, most likely within the area of Nabatea. So it does appear that the Hezbollah forces have confirmed knocked out a tank along with its entire crew during the last night, and we might have actually shown that hit on film, with the Kornet ATGM appearing to have hit the side of the Merkava while it was already burning at that point in the clip. Moving us on into Israel, we have been able to hear that the Israelis are putting out statements that certainly make it seem like they're not going overboard at all, as we were able to hear that the Israeli National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, called for a major escalation in Lebanon, saying that for every tear of an Israeli mother, 1,000 Lebanese mothers should cry. All of Lebanon should burn. That sounds great.
That dude's always saying crazy shit. That dude's crazy as hell right there. That Ben-Gvir guy, he's a lunatic.
Yeah, it's like, gee, that's really making the argument that, Israel isn't going overboard and wiping out civilians really well, like clearly not feeding into that fire. But then Ben-Gvir urged Israel to ignore outside pressure, including from the U.S., and said that measured responses are not enough. In the Middle East, you need to go crazy, erase, defeat terror. Dang. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, this guy kind of has a lot in common with like the people who were in charge in Germany in like the 1930s. I mean, like that kind of rhetoric right there. That's just tantamount to just basically saying that we ought to not we, but Israel ought to conduct war crimes. I mean, those are pretty nuts claims. So of course we can see that some elements of the Israeli government are responding clearly in a rational sense to what's going on.
Also, by the way, I was trying to go see the source of this, by the way, of where he said this allegedly. Apparently, he wrote it in a Twitter post, but X took it down because they said it's in the public interest to take the post down. Apparently, it violated the rules on X. So it was bad enough for even Twitter to take it down. Let me make sure this is his account right here. It just does appear to be his account. It's got the Twitter tag Itamar Ben-Gvir. So it does appear to be his account right here. It's got 360,000 followers. So it says here, translated from Hebrew, for every tear of an Israeli mother, 1,000 Lebanese mothers should weep. All of Lebanon must burn, in his words. Obviously, that's a heinous thing to say, by the way. That's absolutely absurd. That's the kind of junk right there that makes people turn against Israel, that type of talk right there. And that's also, the stuff that people criticize Israel for that's happening inside of Gaza.
And it's really hard, folks, for some people to say, well, Israel clearly isn't following through with those sorts of claims when you look at Gaza. Like, for example, I'll show y'all here really quickly. When you look at a place like Bet Hanun, it's completely destroyed. I mean, you can even see it on satellite. Not a building was left standing. And there's no way, there is no way that you can make the claim that every single building had a Hamas fighter inside of it. There's just not that many Hamas fighters for every building to have one in it. So they just went through and were carpet bombing cities inside of Gaza, wiping out endless amounts of civilians along with it, because they said somewhere in there's probably a Hamas fighter. And when it comes to that, I got to say, folks, I understand that there is a bit of a difficult nuance when it comes to engaging irregular forces like Hamas and Hezbollah, in the fact that they generally do blend in with civilian populaces and also use them as human shields. However, this right here shows that there was absolutely no rules of engagement to speak of. And I mean, you can see this replicated throughout the wider areas of the region. There was absolutely no rules of engagement to speak of. They just carpet bomb entire areas of the cities and wipe out, according to the UN, tens of thousands of civilians within this area during these airstrikes. And when you see people in the Israeli government making claims like Ben-Gvir that there needs to be 1,000 Lebanese mothers that weep for every Israeli one.
It's Ben-Gvir, by the way. It's not Ben-Gvir.
I'm calling him Ben-Gvir. I mean, who cares? Who really cares? But when you see people like him saying that 1,000 Lebanese mothers must weep for every Israeli one, it's kind of hard to kind of distance the claim that the Israelis aren't conducting unnecessary attacks against civilian groups when you have claims like those coming out from Israeli government officials, or statements or calls to action like that. But we also were able to hear additionally that apparently the Israelis also stated today that they've agreed, well, at least according to U.S. officials, I need to make that clear, that Israel and Hezbollah agreed to a ceasefire effective 4 p.m. local time on Friday. This is probably like the 9th one. And as this meme says right here, I've seen this one. It's a classic. And it really is. It's one hell of a classic at this point. This will last maybe 2 hours. And then finally, we were able to hear that some Israelis are stating that generally the whole situation is pointless. And this is what some people in Israel are now claiming. Even the Democratic front is late because they don't know what the message page wants to say to the public this time. A shame and a disgrace like no other. We are a puppet of American rule. Your ballot paper is worth nothing. There is no point in voting. At the end of the day, we are just another star on the American flag. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, I'm not even sure how to take that, to be honest.
I'm not even sure either. I don't really know. I mean, what's the complaint here? Sir, what's your complaint? My steak is too buttery and my lobster is too juicy. It's like, I don't even get it. Like, I don't know. But anyways, moving on from that whole statement that some Israelis were making today, apparently on social media, a lot of people are talking about what's going on right now with the Strait of Hormuz and everything else, as Israel is continuing to battle with Hezbollah in Lebanon, and it does appear that the Iranians are teetering on closing the strait. It doesn't look like they've done it just yet, but they were snapping into it today and appear to have backed off at the last minute, and it looks like they might be conducting a full shutdown possibly tomorrow or in the next coming days. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so the one point that's messing up the entire memorandum of understanding that the U.S. is so desperate to keep intact, by the way, is the Israeli battles with Hezbollah inside of Lebanon, because Hezbollah keeps trying to push the envelope like these terrorist groups love to do by launching rockets at northern Israel to hurt civilians, and Israel responded by doing an invasion. That's what they did. So now, allegedly, Iran has closed the Hormuz Strait, but that's a little bit up for debate right now. It appears to be the traffic on the marine tracker showing stuff moving through. But even outside of that, though, there's another problem. The Iranians are not negotiating, they're not going to Switzerland, and they're not talking with the United States during that 60-day period that's outlined in the MOU until Israel abides by their demands to withdraw from Lebanon. So essentially, the deal's collapsed. Regardless of what's happening with the Hormuz Strait, it's still collapsed. So what is the U.S. going to do in response to the entire thing falling apart? It looks like people across the board are all over the place in this one. 34% said the U.S. will wait the 60 days to attack like outlined in the MOU, while 32% said the U.S. will not restart attacks ever on Iran, and 15% said Iran will negotiate again very soon. So on this one, I would say this. I think the U.S. is going to try to push negotiations at all costs. They're going to start putting pressure on Israel like we've never seen before to basically stop defending themselves and back off completely and just let Hezbollah do what they want so that way the U.S. can claim a victory. That's what they're going to try to do. But Israel is not going to abide by that because, of course, they're a sovereign country and they're not going to simply just give up, defending their country just because the U.S. says so. So what's going to happen instead, like I outlined last night, is Iran's going to launch an attack on Israel and it's going to start the whole thing back up again. So that's my guess. I think the U.S. will eventually have to restart attacks, mainly in a defensive posture instead of an offensive posture. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I think that we're probably going to wait the 60 days to attack, or we're probably not ever going to restart them ever. It's really hard to say right now because there's still about another 60 days to the MOU, but I have a feeling that the U.S. is going to be adamant on pushing this whole MOU through. According to the president right now, and not to make it sound like I'm making any jabs, but this is what he's saying, and knowing his personality and character, we know what's going to happen next. It's the greatest ceasefire ever made. It's the best thing ever. No other president was ever able to do this. Nobody in history could have done it. Not even George Washington or any of the founding fathers. I'm truly the greatest person alive. Israel and the U.S. and the military and everything wouldn't exist without me. So we know that based off of these statements of grandeur and self-aggrandizing, that there is going to be no attempt to break this quick. They're going to try and push this through because breaking it quickly is basically going to be saying that the whole thing was a crock of crap, and the president can't take that to his own ego. So he'll be trying to push this through the whole 60 days if possible, and then at the end of those 60 days, we might see that they attack, or we might see that we start to enter the, we're in a ceasefire and the Iranians attacked us today, but the ceasefire is still in effect sort of a deal, which could also end up going on forever at that point, depending on, however the president wakes up on that given day. So I'll be entirely honest with y'all, folks. It's really hard to say, but I'd be in between the two largest voting groups.
Also, by the way, folks, if you want a little bit of a different perspective here, and this is going to be non-political right here. Also, by the way, just let Enforcer know, just for full disclosure, what I'm about to say in just a second here is simply trying to analyze the strategy of what the U.S. might be trying to plot out here and do. It's not about, this party's bad, this party's good, or et cetera, like nothing like that. But just to outline this, by the way, the midterm elections are coming up in November the 3rd of this year. So if they're planning on extending this for 60 days in these negotiations, they might be trying to wait till the midterms till they start this back up. But that's going to be a bit of a challenge, though, because 60 days, I don't think that gets them to November. I think that is like right before November, actually. I'm pretty sure. I can't do the math super quick in my head, but I'm pretty sure it falls short.
Mid-August.
So, yeah, mid-August then. Yeah, thank you for that. So they got to stall it beyond August somehow if they're trying to wait until after the midterms. So I don't think they're going to be able to do that under any circumstance. So I don't think the midterms are going to be, I don't think it's going to be a motivating factor here. I don't think. I know some people are going to say, well, that's what they're waiting for. There's just no way they can feasibly push it that far back. They simply can't. There's no way to stall that long. Iran will certainly do something before November that forces a response. So I don't think the midterms are coming into play here.
And also on top of that, if the Iranians blockade the Strait and we just try and bury our head in the sand like we did for a while here and just pretend like that's not happening to try and make it to the midterms, then the oil shortages hit the United States in probably mid-July at this point, or early July, which is what the last estimates were, which is just a couple of weeks, and then that's going to end up obliterating them in the midterms. Honestly, at this point, folks, I think no matter how this is going, the current group's going to get obliterated in the midterms. That's got the majority in the executive and the Congress. There's no way that they can make it to the midterms without this turning into an absolute dumpster fire at this point. Either we're going to have to restart the war against the Iranians, and knowing how badly they planned strategy, which we saw in the first part of the conflict, it's going to go poorly again, and we're probably going to run into shortages and be in a war, which is going to make the feeling very sour, and they'll probably end up losing them the midterms. Or they'll try and just wait it out and pretend like nothing's wrong, and then the shortages hit the United States, which economically is going to be devastating, and then that's going to destroy them in the midterms. I just don't really see any way they can make it to that point and have a positive outcome politically.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying that the midterms are irrelevant to the situation. I know people want to say, oh, they're trying to do this with the midterms, et cetera. It's over with. Whatever has happened already, that's going to be a talking point by the time the midterms roll around. So I don't think the midterms are a benchmark to say something's going to happen before or after the midterms. I think that's kind of irrelevant at this point. Something's going to almost certainly happen before the midterms, and that's what I'm expecting personally.
Yeah, I mean, there is a third option. There is a third option, folks. I don't know if they're smart enough up there to listen to this one. I've only been saying it the whole year. Anthony knows exactly you know what I'm about to say, don't you? About what they can do.
Oh, well, what is it?
They can go back to war and they can just bomb out the Strait of Hormuz and forcibly reopen it. They can just break the blockade.
Yeah.
That's the one thing they can't do.
Yeah, I mean, that would be better than just sitting back and doing nothing. At least they'd have an argument that they tried to finish the job, at least. That would probably be a stronger argument than, just surrendering. That's just common sense. That's not even political. That's just common sense. What's better, finishing the job or at least, at least trying to finish the job or just surrendering?
Let's say here, hypothetically, folks, that we're speaking about this from a political perspective because the midterms are basically a burner on everyone's ass right now up in the White House. So they're trying to figure out how in the world do we curtail this disaster to where it is not devastating for the midterms. Because if the midterms go badly enough, there could be consequences to follow in the internal political situation in the United States. So let's sit in the political camp of the current people in charge and go, how do we game the whole situation out to where it doesn't end up being that bad? So we have the three options that we already talked about. And the first option is, let's just pretend like nothing's wrong. And if the Iranians blockade the Strait again, we're not going to go to war with them, and we're just going to completely avoid conflict with them. An economic crisis is going to hit the United States in the next couple of weeks because of the fuel shortages. That is going to end up losing the midterms entirely. It's going to be such a bad economic fallout. No one's really going to be happy with that, no matter how much of a political diehard they are. The second option is, is that they can go back to war at some point before the midterms, but they don't end up clearing out the Strait of Hormuz. They just end up bombing the biggest things in Iran every day to get cool headlines. Like we bombed Tehran for the 9,000th time, or we blew up a big bridge, or like there was this big building and it got blown up, and that doesn't really do anything. So the strait would remain blockaded. We're now in a war that's grinding on endlessly and achieving nothing strategically, and also the shortages hit the United States again, and that would actually be the worst case scenario if you re-entered the war, did not break the blockade, and then the war kept dragging on as the economic impact hit. That would be the worst impact at all that you could ever see. That would end up in a complete wipeout in the midterms. The only option, the third option, is restart the war, but limit it entirely to the area within the near areas of the Hormuz. So 100 miles into Iran from the coast and in the Hormuz region, and clearing out the blockade. If they clear out the blockade, when the midterms come around, they can actually say, the war started off shaky, but we recovered, rebounded, cleared out the strait. Now Iran does not have control of it, and the oil is flowing freely. So we did run into a bit of an economic calamity, but it wasn't that bad, and we're already stabilizing the situation, and now Iran's on the run, and we can largely keep this war going as long as we want, and they'll have to eventually accept our demands, not the other way around. And as far as the three sorts of outcomes that you could get politically, the third option, which I just explained, is probably going to be the one that would give them the most success. Whether or not they're going to follow through with that on the strategic impact globally is a whole other question. The answer is definitely not. Like, we've already seen enough of their track record so far. They're not going to go with that one. They're probably going to go with option 1 or 2.
It'll be purely defensive from this point forward. I'm not expecting any offensive operations on Iran. It'll be purely defensive, because I'm almost certain that Iran's going to attack Israel or attack U.S. bases before the U.S. ever starts an offensive operation, probably again. So that'll be what kicks it off. It'll be something defensive on the U.S. part.
I would agree. In the meantime, we also were able to hear that apparently the Secretary of State is going to be traveling to the Middle East to visit Kuwait, the UAE, and Bahrain, according to 2 sources. We're not sure if that's going to happen. They might cancel that last minute. And we also got to hear some interesting side stories from Iran and elsewhere in the region, as the Iranian Deputy Minister of Energy, Rajavi Mashadi, said,
"Bro, it's the night terrors meme. It's back. Somebody put it down there. Oh my God, it's our viewer too, right there. Put that down there. Y'all are doing me dirty with that right there. What was this? This is the Lucid Dreams poster. Oh, y'all did me dirty."
The art of the knee.
Oh my God. Oh, yeah, they changed the words on it. I didn't even realize that until just now.
Oh my God. Man, that's something. But anyways, nuclear energy experts will return to Iran as soon as possible to continue the construction of phase 2 and 3 of the Bushehr nuclear power plant. So the Iranians are returning. The Russians are returning back to Iran to keep working on Bushehr. In the midst of this all, we did get to hear of some explosions near Idlib today in northern Syria, which is a hotbed of terrorist activity of every single group. And I gotta say, folks, we don't even know what happened up here. Could have been U.S. airstrikes. Could have been Al-Qaeda. Could have been ISIS. It could have been anybody. We have no clue. There are so many terrorist groups that operate around Idlib that there is really no way for us to even know what happened up here or who did it yet. The story has to become a little bit more clear. There were reports of explosions. We do know that there was some sort of hostile actions that happened up there between some groups, but we just don't have any further details than that. On the flip side, however, in southern Afghanistan, in the Balochistan region, Afghanistan's defense ministry claims its air force conducted strikes against ISIS hideouts in Pakistan's Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa provinces. The ministry stated the sites were used to coordinate attacks on Afghanistan with external support. So according to Afghanistan today, they conducted strikes with their air forces, which they don't really have, against ISIS hideouts in Pakistan. I gotta say, folks, out of everything I ever expected today, the Taliban attacking ISIS, a terrorist group versus terrorist group, really isn't something I ever expected out of the region today. But that's
man,
news.
you know that everybody hates the ISIS. Like, everybody hates ISIS. Like, the Taliban hate them too. Like, the Taliban say that the ISIS are too extreme, so they go attack them. That's how bad ISIS is.
Well, you know what's interesting is that ISIS has actually bombed Kabul a couple of times since the Taliban took control, and they've killed hundreds in most of those attacks. It's been pretty brutal. So yeah, that's something interesting that a lot of people actually don't know about ISIS, folks, is that ISIS is the black sheep of every group in the region. Every terrorist force fights them. Every single country in the region fights them. Literally anybody fights ISIS. They're so extreme and so radical and also so draconian that literally nobody, not even the most extreme extreme terrorist groups outside of ISIS can even align with them or work with them. So they end up being the enemy of quite literally everybody in the region, even the terrorist groups. So there is a possibility that up near Idlib, Al-Qaeda was attacking ISIS, or ISIS was attacking Al-Qaeda, or whatever is left of them up there near Idlib, but we don't really know for sure. But moving us on out of that news inside of the whole of the Middle East, it's now time for us to move on out of the area and back on up into Europe. We were able to see that, speaking of the Middle East and kind of rounding out the whole story while getting back into Europe, there is still a significant number of B-1 Lancers, basically all of them that we have. Well, not all of them. There's actually a good bit more B-1 Lancers than we're seeing here, but a decent amount of the B-1 Lancers that we're seeing here are at RAF Mildenhall still, and RAF Fairford, which is giving us a pretty good idea that the U.S. is still expecting that there may be a resumption of hostilities with the Islamic Republic of Iran. We can also see an additional 8 B-52 bombers based at RAF Fairford as well there in that satellite picture. Moving us on out of that and on into Ukraine, we've also been able to see that the Ukrainian armed forces are conducting another significant drone attack on Russia again right now as we're on air. We're expecting that these drones will most likely start to reach Moscow right after we get off of air due to most of their speeds being somewhat slow. And we've also been able to see that down in Crimea, things are still getting worse. In the area of Simferopol, a heavy AA fire was heard throughout the whole of the city. That's right there.
That sounds real heavy.
I would say maybe 50 pounds. We also
what's up with the tropical bird noises in the background?
Oh, it's that toucan that came on vacation from Brazil, got stuck there. So now it just makes those noises like that.
Interesting.
We also got this clip. You see the AA fire in the distance. Look at it. Little tracers. Oh! One Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. 3 Mississippi. No explosion. Oh well.
Oh, cry me a river.
Oh, there it was, finally. It was pretty far away, actually.
You can hear the dogs of war barking away in the background. Oh, there's all the fire. You can kind of see it.
Oh, yeah, there's some more of it. Some more tracer fire out there. That might be near to the, I forgot the name of the airfield nearby, but it looks like it might not be directly in the city. It might be around that airfield to the northwest of the city. Moving us on from that clip, and those clips, it's time for us to move on up and into the area of the far western region of the Crimean Peninsula. Here in Glebovsky, the Ukrainians hit a gas storage facility and blew it to pieces. Now it's time for us to get into the actual clip. Now they're going to show y'all where this strike happened, on that building. We see all of the different buildings that they want to blow up. And now here comes the drones to blow them to pieces.
Oh, look, a quick arrival. Look at that. Fresh arrivals. Ooh.
Same day delivery.
Ah, they did deliver. They delivered Hellfire, looks like. Oh. Oh.
Oh man, they toasted
coming
it.
Down here and putting the hurt on the Russians. Oh.
You heard me?
Yeah, you heard me. Look at them. Putting the burn on them down here. They're going to need to take a dip in the Crimea River. Oh.
Sadly, they just don't have any water or fuel or food left or anything. It's like they're kind of running out of everything, sadly. I gotta say, watching this gas facility getting hit multiple times really reminds me, folks, that, the Galaxy gas is in abundance here in America. Complete side note. But man.
You gotta come right when you're gonna talk to the boss, huh?
You heard me?
Hey, honestly, Ukraine's the boss now. I tell you what, they're filling up the river with the tears of the Russians at this point. Crimea River, they got the river's flowing good.
They also continue to hit Russian logistics down here in Crimea. MTLBs, the gas facilities, what have you, everything. I won't show you all this whole clip here. It's basically a repeat of most of the attacks we've seen over the past few days, but I will show you what they're trying to do to deal with it. In Crimea, there's a few fuel trucks that have somehow been able to make it through. These trucks are lucky, but they're very few and far in between, and are, of course, under the ever-present threat of a Ukrainian attack blowing up the truck and also the drivers. The Russians are now deploying mobile fire groups in the back of Kamaz trucks, which have now been outfitted with machine guns on swivels to be able to try and deal with the incoming drone attacks. And they're also moving these fuel trucks in convoys, not only in Crimea, but on the M14 highway.
That's going to work swell, man. That's going to work super swell because, that you had to be basically a sharpshooter to hit the thing moving around with a stationary machine gun like that. And we all know that the Russian forces are all sharpshooters with their 2 weeks at maximum of training. So this will work about as good as a can of soup trying to take the drone down. This will suck.
A can of soup, you can really put some power into that. But here's the actual trucks on the highway. There's the head of the convoy and the fuel trucks following them. This is Russia's attempt to try and get a little bit of fuel into Crimea. This is a giant road bomb driving down the highway, man. Three of them in one group.
It's like, how the hell is that one truck with a machine gun on supposed to defend 3 separate fuel trucks? Like, even if they can defend the one at the front, which I really doubt they probably even defend one of them, it's like the other 2 are goners.
Also, what about that thing's firing arc? It can only fire behind the truck, so they're just firing into the windshields of the trucks behind them at that point, trying to hit the drone. It's like, what use is this really?
Oh, yeah. You know what this is? Like, let's be honest. This is like the equivalent of look busy when you're at work. Like, the Russian generals were being told by Putin, fix the problem and get it fixed quick. And the generals were like, what the hell do we do? What do we do? Just send out a truck with a machine gun on it so that way we can say we did something. Because this is obviously not going to work, but at least the generals can report back to Putin and say, look, we did something. Don't send us to the gulag.
I honestly, man, like, this seems to me to be the equivalent of the old, I don't know if you ever seen them before, but the Vietnam era war wagons. Like, have you ever heard of that before?
I think so, yeah.
Like, they're like the M35, like 2.5 ton and 5 ton trucks that they would equip with like tons of machine guns in the truck bed, and they would just have a whole bunch of guys manning that for ambushes and whatnot. It's basically kind of like the same thing, but it's done even worse, because if you look at how these things are set up, the firing arc on that is only 180 degrees to the left and the right of the rear of the truck, but because of the canvas on the front of it, there's no protection. Well, there's really no firing arc there. Like, there's no way to really get the gun on an incoming drone at a low altitude, which they are, and so it's very limited in effect. On the other hand, if you look at a Vietnam war wagon, like, this thing is like optimized for this kind of a job. It has a 360-degree firing arc because it's in the complete wide open. That's actually an M113 that they just strapped down to the back of the bed, and that's actually pretty smart. But it has a 360-degree firing arc and a couple of machine guns to boot with a couple of gunners. So you have kind of a more optimal, like, air defense setup with this thing, with a war wagon, than you do with what the Russians have even come up with. Man, they can't even do a war wagon good. This thing's been around for like 50 years. They can't even figure that one out.
And they weren't even shooting down drones in Nam.
Man, they was chopping down trees. They called these guys logging men, or lumberjacks, the way they was cutting down them forests. I tell you. These things, by the way, just to give you a little bit of background, because some of y'all might find this historically neat, but these were actually used on the QL19 highway from the coastline here at Quy Nhon, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, along the highway to the city of Pleiku, which was a major point of U.S. military operations during the war in Vietnam. So that's why these were made, is because they kept getting ambushed, these 10-mile-long convoys along the highway to Pleiku, and so they came up with an idea of building these war wagons to put a couple of them in the front of the convoy, the rear of the convoy, in the middle of the convoy, so that way if the Viet Cong or the NVA or anyone else tried to ambush the convoy, the war wagons would chop them down, or at least suppress them enough that they'd retreat, cutting down on the supply losses and the personnel losses being seen on the QL19 highway. So a little interesting piece of Vietnam War era history. But moving us on out of that, and on into the rest of the news that we have from in Ukraine today, we also get to see that Donetsk also came under attack, and the Shahed launchers at the Donetsk International Airport were targeted and destroyed today by the armed forces of Ukraine once more. Look at that airfield, laden with drone launchers, loads of them.
This is what they call a target-rich environment right here. Very rich.
Man, rich. The Ukrainians about to make him broke. Run them pockets. Oh, actually, well, that was the end of the clip.
Oh, no, we didn't get to see nothing. They didn't run any pockets.
Well, I mean, I declare, but we also got to see this clip. That's definitely a drone. Moving us on out of those clips, it's now time for us folks to move on into the front lines themselves. And we've got some news to tell you. Oh boy, oh buddy. Buhanka was destroyed today by the 421st Battalion. And I wish I could play all the music, but it is extremely copyrighted. Observe. I cannot play any more of that. That's literally all you'll get. But they made a whole meme out of it. You see, the Buhanka's coming. They got an AI version of it. The Russians enjoying the ride.
Oh man, I can hear that music right behind it right now. I can hear it. Oh yeah.
And they got it.
Oh damn.
Oh man, that was a good one. They did really good with the editing on that one. That was a pretty funny one. We also got to see the Ukrainians also going out of their way to destroy the Russians' FPV ambush drones in these clips, also in the same front. Dang, man, that thing dived in like dived in with like the elbow, basically.
It dove.
Man, it's peaceful like a bull, bled.
Man, peaceful like a dove.
man, them does, man. Oh man, there goes the basement dwellers. See.
Oh, that's not a good spot to go. That's not good. Have they not ever heard if unfortunately if your dog's outside and was lightning and scared of lightning, it always goes under the trailer. Bad spot. It's like, have the Russians never heard of that? It's like, don't go under the trailer.
Man, they get electrocuted, but it ain't by lightning. Man, but anyways, moving on into our location unknowns, we also get to see this Russian position getting hit by an airstrike. And who said the Ukrainians didn't have an air force?
Oh wow, look at that. They just ground forced them too. Look, little Air Force and ground force all in one.
I gotta say, man, we're really doing good, like, with the laughs tonight. We need to keep this up. we really need to. But that, we've also been able to see the Russian casualty report for the past 24 hours. And holy moly!
Bobcats every day, like Mestiza says. Bobcats every day. I'm starting to take this for granted. I'm becoming a glutton with Bobcats at this point. A pure glutton. But tell us more.
Bobcats daily. 3 square Bobcats a day. I mean, like, you can't get better than that. Literally 3 square Bobcats. It's just unreal. People have been calling me up from all around going, Sir, let's make another foreign policy crisis. Like, we love it. But moving on from that, Miss D Secure the Records has stated that 441 supply trucks and fuel trucks is the 5th highest loss. 4 ground robotic complexes were also destroyed, which wasn't shown. And troop losses is over 1,300 a day consistently, so 1 week to 1.4 million. And oh, buddy, I can't wait for that. And over the past 24 hours, we have been able to see that 1,370 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed, along with 4 APCs, 441 supply trucks, 2 main battle tanks, 58 artillery pieces, 1,968 drones, 4 MLRSs, 4 cruise missiles, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and 3 Bobcat skid steers. All in all, a very good thing to see, and once again showing that the Ukrainians are putting in that work. Moving us on into where they were clocking in that work, it's time to get to Shabakino, as the Ukrainians were showing us in the 17th Brigade what work really looks like in those morning hours. The drones just sifting through the position and finding the most opportune spot to hit, and then they hit it.
You'd think they'd hear it, kind of like, scurrying around the camp, but, we did see yesterday a Russian straight up open the door for a drone after he heard it outside.
And he said, oh man, death is outside. Let me welcome it on in. Come on in. Like, it's like, you idiot. It's like you just got everyone killed.
This is definitely a Russian position. It's like trash galore at this position.
Dang, that was a shock. Oh my God, a second one. From their shockwaves ripping through the whole camp.
I know they have a bit of a Smokey Bear situation on their hands. It looks like a little forest fire breaking out.
So when the Russians come out of this position, are they smoked Russians?
I guess. I guess.
Is that like smoked pork or smoked orc?
Yeah, orc.
I think it is. We also got to see Ukrainian drones ambushing some Russians in the Vovchansk area here. Oh, and there they go running. Look at them. How silly. They didn't outrun it either. Oh, damn. That thing like caught on fire like kindling. I also had the side of that metal shack, and this one as well. Damn! Okay, well, these things have got some incendiary force to them. Didn't know that. That's news. I also see them hitting a comms tower and, oh, what a vehicle of some sort. Couldn't really tell you all what kind, sadly. And they just flew in here and hit a wheelbarrow. That was a strategic wheelbarrow, mind you all.
The Russians, they have a green thumb. They garden when they have free time, of course, you know. Probably because they can't get any food from the logistics trucks because they got blown up before they got there.
Honestly. Oh, man. I tell you, these clips these days are crazy stuff. Moving us on past the northern front. Unfortunately, you didn't get any video or picture evidence there. And on down towards the area of Chasiv Yar and Konstantinivka, we did get to see this one Ukrainian soldier here take care of two Russian soldiers with one simple trick. We see the Russians here all gathered up in the building facing down this one Ukrainian soldier who's currently being very sneaky. We can also see that these two Russians have decided to hide in this wide-open hole in the basement. This was a bad idea. The Ukrainian lobbed a grenade in there and took out both of them with one go. The third guy ended up running away wounded. And this was all done by one Ukrainian soldier. These three Russians had the attacker's advantage, a 3-to-1 ratio. Yet, due to their own stupidity and lack of tactics, and also the fact that they didn't stay spread out and in open areas where they could maneuver, they were overwhelmed by a smaller foe. And thus, the story continues. The Russians continue to get schwacked by quite literally just one dude out there against three. Moving us on from that clip, we also were able to see that down on the rest of the Konstantinivka front, things were remaining busy. The 2nd Marine Battalion was making sure to really give the Russians the whole 9 yards, cooking up their position. And a couple of others. Many people do understand that the Russians, due to their lack of funding and lack of equipment, aren't able to have centralized heating within most of the buildings that they reside in and hide in during the daylight hours. So for that reason, the Ukrainians decide to burn the buildings down that they're in to give them a little bit of warmth in their final hours. It's a very humane thing.
The Russians went from drinking like a fiend on the bottle and being quite fond of the drink to hotboxing the positions on the front.
It's like a sauna in there. It's a real luxury, a spa, really. We also got to see in Pokrovsk the shelling in the city by the 7th Army Corps was also a little bit pressing for the Russians today. Let's take a little look at that. Ah, there's the city. And there we go. A couple of strikes. It's not like bowling, though. A little bit different. And the scoring's also done a little bit differently as well, unfortunately. It's not as straightforward. The 7th Corps is really putting together a nice infographic here on the side. Don't know what it says, sadly. I don't read Ukrainian that good.
It says we're winning, we hit the building, and it's all over with for the Russians. Go on home, take it easy, and pack it up.
Oh! Man, they blew away the whole middle of the apartment building.
Man, they're pulling in Israel.
Man. Luckily, there's no civilians in that building.
Thank God.
That's kind of the difference. But moving us on from that, we also were able to see Russian forces getting hit a little bit further south by the 36th Marine Brigade. Let's take a little look at this. This intro. Wait a minute. This is a duplicate. Getting rid of that. Moving on down to Oleski, we also were able to see that the 34th Marine Brigade was also doing some work against the Russians down here. And the town of Oleski, we can see that that's Russian shit, as that little emoji shows right there. Now, there's 2 Russian shits. A third. Oh, and I have 4th even, maybe. Or those are the same 2 guys, just from a different angle. And they got him in the greenhouse. Goodness gracious. They got him in the greenhouse. Oh, dang. They're like really hitting that greenhouse. They ain't letting them go. Meanwhile, man, that cat's up there, man, looking a little feral. Up there in the top left.
Yeah, really. That's almost like a bobcat. Look at this ghoul on down here. Look at that little freak.
Look at that damn that freak.
I couldn't think of what that was. I was like, oh, let's insult the hell out of him. They'll fix it.
Well, I mean, it works, I suppose. Definitely not out of place. But that was one hell of a freak. He was on fire, too. I mean, you got to be kind of a freak to be on fire. But outside of that, folks, it is time for us to get on into the rest of our segments for the show, because that was actually the last piece of news that we had for the day. And I've got to say, folks, a big thanks to everyone who's been watching so far tonight. We still have a lot of questions to go. This is the segment where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. It's the question segment. But I do have to thank all 100,000 people who have watched in the first 2 hours of the show, and the peak viewership here, that was 17.2 thousand people. I've got to thank each and every single one of y'all who has watched so far tonight. We're absolutely honored and greatly appreciative to know that so many of y'all consider this channel to be your primary source of news and continue to come here and watch this channel each and every single day. I hope that y'all will continue to stay around, because the question segment is always an interesting time. We usually have some very interesting questions and rabbit holes to get into and whatnot, and I cannot wait to get into each and every single one of them. And so, without further ado, Matthew, what do we got?
Also, by the way, before we move into our questions, our super chats, our live chats, etc., and thank all the folks that support the channel tonight, and also get some live chats from the chatters, I have something else I want to show y'all, by the way, that Miss Disa just brought up right now, and it's something very cool, by the way, that I think y'all should probably know about, because the United States loves to go around saying, what has Ukraine ever done for us? Is Ukraine ever going to pay us back for all the money that we just willy-nilly gave away to the Ukrainians to defend themselves against the dictatorship? What are they doing for us? Because, of course, everything's transactional. It's not just about, helping a country out that's trying to defend itself in a democracy. It's about getting something out of it, because that's the way we are as Americans. We want something out of it. Well, Ukraine is giving us something out of it. Have you heard of this, by the way, Enforcer? It's called Trophy Lab. It's something that Ukraine just launched about 18 hours ago.
I actually did hear about that. I didn't include it in the news. I thought no one would care. But that's that, also, I don't mean that to put the story down. I just thought that people would be like, because the implications behind it are big, but it doesn't really seem direct. But they actually created a library, of all of the Russian weapon systems that they've captured and dissected, for every single one of their allies to get direct access to. So it's basically a library of all of the Russians' military capabilities in full form.
Yeah, it's literally an online portal where the Ukrainians share every single dissection of every weapon. In fact, here's the post about it right here. You can show them the video. This is what Ukraine put out, by the way. And Trophy Lab is now live. So the United States can simply log into Trophy Lab. They can see dimensions, stats, and all the information they need to reverse engineer or develop defenses against all of Russia's weapons that Ukraine has ever captured. So I would say this is better than even saying thank you, as the Vice President of the United States wanted Zelensky to say a long time ago. I would say this is better than that, I would say. Hey, honestly, also, by the way, cool video for it, by the way. They're hyping that up pretty strong, but that's actually a really cool idea. I like that a lot. It's got to piss the Russians off quite a bit.
Yeah, I bet you it does. And also, something else that's interesting is that it looks like in this infographic, they're actually showing that they break down each part and what country of origin it came from.
Yeah, it does actually, and also I'm sure there's some Chinese weapons in there somewhere, because China's shipping them stuff, and also North Korean weapons too. So I'm sure all that stuff's in there.
And I'm wondering, like, I'm trying to see here if there's anything that's classified yet that I don't know, or I'm like, oh, look at that, like, it's like War Thunder League. It's like, oh my god, I'm not seeing anything yet, at least that we wouldn't know over here. Most of the stuff right here is actually publicly available information they're showing here, but this might just be the public example. Let's see. It doesn't look like anything on here yet is, say, like, confidential or like it wasn't known yet. It looks like all the stuff is publicly accessible information they're showing in this video, but I bet you they have a lot more greater detail that they go into for the actual people who can log into the system and take a look around it. So that's really 100%.
Cool. And also there's an advantage to keeping it secret, like exactly what Ukraine knows about Russian weapons, because if Russia gets the idea that Ukraine is dissected one of their weapons, they might try to change it or try to modify it in some way. So that way the Ukrainians don't know what's up with the new one. They might try to do that. So I'm sure there's a lot that we're not seeing publicly that's inside that Trophy Lab system.
Well, I mean, kind of to a point, but if a weapon that's been captured, and most tanks have been captured intact at some point, like the T-90M and the T-90A, and I believe the T-72B3 and the T-80 BVM, generally it would be expected at that point, at least by the Russians, that every single part of it had been taken apart and combed through. And also on top of this, it's not like Russia could change anything. It's not like they're building them new. It's also like they don't have the money to replace anything on them either. So how they are is how they come, I think, at this point. But that may be a good point, especially on some of the systems.
Yeah, I would say between Trophy Lab setting that up, that's a nice thing to set up for the United States to access to check out Russian weapons. Also, the drone partnership that Ukraine's going to be undertaking with the United States to develop FPV technology to fight the next war. I would say Ukraine might be one of our most influential partners that we have at the moment between everything. I would say they certainly are.
I would agree, honestly. I mean, really a great ally to have. Oh, an amazing thing, folks. Just throwing a little bit of money their way, it helps us out so greatly. I'd say that.
Imagine how much the U.S. would have had to pay a spy to get that information, to bribe a Russian officer to get that kind of information. Who knows how much the Russian officer would have wanted. When the CIA sends out an agent, they'll be like, oh, go recruit somebody, go get some access to some information or something like that. They usually offer, if they can get a Russian, to flip, they'll offer them some money in exchange for that information. They'll make them rich, in other words, to give over some secrets. But it looks like Ukraine's doing it for free.
Man, they did it for free. How kind of them, really. How kind of them. We got so much out of Ukraine, folks. We gave them $90 billion of secondhand equipment we were going to destroy anyways. And in return, we got all of Russia's military secrets that they were able to get. It's way better than giving Iran like $660 billion and getting nothing out of it, and in fact losing more than we had at the start. Honestly, that's way better of a deal to me. Real art of the deal, art of the meal kind of stuff going on right there. Real square one. But anyway, so with that, it is time for us to get on into the question segment. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, moving right back into our Super Chat segment here, let's thank the donors of the night that's keeping the channel running. And so far, we've had a $50 support as well during our last question segment from none other than Blind Man. And thank you very much, Blind Man, for that $50 support right there. And we do appreciate that very, very much. And Blind Man said, hello, enforcers in LSA, and says the world is full of what ifs, could be's, and who thunk it. I traced my family line to feudal Europe. And if the Prussians failed at uniting the German states, I'd be 258th in line for the German throne. Oh well, but to live chat on me.
Thank you so much for the support, Blind Man. And that's very interesting. Interestingly enough, our family history actually has some people who aren't really extremely notable in them, but if history had gone differently, we might be in a different place. Like, for example, the first people in our family's actual name, like the name that we carry, were actually, the first person in that family was actually a king of northern Wales. And so, if Wales had never been conquered under the English, we might actually be Welsh royalty. Or we might actually have some sort of estate inside of Devon, which is also another part of the family. It's really interesting looking at that stuff, but all that stuff is literally 1,000 years ago. That's all pre-Norman conquest of England in the Battle of Hastings, and just like immediate post-aftermath of the Battle of Hastings sort of a deal. So it's literally 1,000 years old at this point, literally. But it's still really cool to look at that and be like, wow, that's really neat. That's where the family comes from. And then there's some more of them that come from Scotland and also, I believe, Ireland as well, but the Irish parts are very small. But it's a really cool thing, looking at family history and lineage, especially for a lot of people here in the United States of America, because it kind of lets them know where they come from. And they're always going to find out that they never came from the United States of America. but a big thanks to you so much. Let's give her the support and help with this channel to keep it running. And I hope that does address that the best I can. At least in my opinion. And I'd have to say, it's very unfortunate to hear that you're not 258th in line for the German throne, or the Prussian throne, that would be. But, at least, it's not all bad. We still got this channel. That's one thing that came out of the whole, way the history is right now. I would say that's not too bad. But with that, we will make sure to get a live chat in your honor. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so the live chat question is going to go to none other than Philip Southern, who said, do you and Andrew think the Ukrainians might be planning to flank the Russians on the north and open a road towards Moscow?
No. No. That would be an existential threat to the state. That's nuclear worthy. All they would be doing is trying to offset or throw off Russian offensive plans in northern Ukraine. That would probably be the actual intention. Because outside of that, I don't see them doing anything grander than that. They don't really have the manpower or the resources to be able to throw at the situation to really do that. And also the Russians will send their own forces into that area to try and defend against the Ukrainian offensive, meaning that it would be wise, and the Ukrainians are quite wise with their command, to develop their offensive plans with a limited scope. And so I don't think they'll be opening up any attack paths to Moscow per se, at least in my opinion. But a big thanks to you for sponsoring that live chat right there, Blind Man, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Wubba Actual. Thank you, Wubba, as well, for the $25 super chat. We also appreciate that as well. And Wubba said, let's light this candle.
You know, I'm more of turning on the light switch kind of a guy. Very easy, really. Like, I'm just kidding. I know what you mean. I know it's a figure of speech. And I gotta say, why not? Why not? The Ukrainians seem to be apt to light at this point. I think they probably have measured out the situation well enough to know what they're getting into and what could happen. So we'll see. I mean, they might light the candle or the Belarusians might back off. Either way, I think the Ukrainians have a pretty good idea that it's going to end up beneficial to them no matter how it turns out. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And a big thanks to you for the support and help this channel keep it running. And with that, we're on the next one.
Also, a big shout out to none other than Bobo Vasquez, who put in a $20 support and also is helping to keep the channel running. And a huge shout out to you, Bobo, for being a longtime channel legend and being here for such a long time throughout all the days of all the crazy stuff happening and all of us living through such crazy times over the last 4+ years. Really quite wild. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, humongous thanks to you for support, Bobo Vasquez. You've been around with us for years, I say. And folks like you have been supporting this channel for years as well. And we gotta thank y'all greatly for enjoying the channel and supporting it because y'all make it possible. As we always say, there's no magic money behind the scenes that keeps this show on air as much as the people up at Langley would like y'all to think. It is actually the viewers themselves that keep this homegrown American propaganda operation running and on air. And we greatly thank you, folks, for making sure to support this channel and help it to keep on running so we can continue to support American and Western interests around the globe. And so a big thanks to you so much once again, Bobo. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're on the next one.
And our next one is going to go to none other than Rebecca Bruce. And thank you, Rebecca, for the $20 support. And Rebecca said, thank you so much for all you do. And LSA.
And I thank you so much, Rebecca Bruce, for enjoying everything we do. We try our best, and I hope that tonight it was once again another good night of coverage. We try our best to make sure to get to the news first, and to make sure to cover all of the developments the best we can, and to provide, hopefully, the best analysis that y'all have heard on where things could go. And I thank you so much for appreciating that and supporting it, so we can keep this thing rolling and keep this thing a reality. And so, long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never truly die. And with that, we're on the next one.
And a big shout out to Booth Hazard, who put in a 20. And thank you, good sir, as well for that support. He said, howdy there. I've been watching for a few months and love what y'all do. And thank you, by the way. He said, have you ever thought about having a special guest or a subject matter expert for the stream or short form videos? And long live the LSA. And we, like way back in the day, like the people that have been here for quite some time will remember that we have experimented with guests. There's a handful of them that we still talk to, and the rest of them we don't, because after they left the channel, then their true colors came out, and they were simply coming on the channel to try to basically siphon off our subscribers to a certain degree. So we wised up, we made some mistakes at the beginning. Now that does not mean we're completely opposed to bringing a special guest on. If the special guest is somebody that people really want to hear from, and they're not just like somebody trying to come on here and siphon subscribers, we might be open to it, but the catch is they couldn't come onto the stream though because it doesn't fit into the format. So maybe one day, but Enforcer, what say you?
Maybe one day, like Matthew's saying, because really the live stream format just doesn't really support guests. And we tried our best to make that work back in the day, and it just didn't really work all too well. And then also on top of that, a decent amount of the people that we brought on back then were quite venomous. Have no idea why. And honestly, folks, like that really started off our whole endeavor into YouTube in a very bitter way, which honestly I've had to kind of like learn myself out of over the years, because we started off in the Ukraine war category solely. And one thing I will have to say, and this isn't about everybody in the Ukraine war category, but this is about like at least half or most of the people we dealt with that specialize in that category. They were very two-faced, angry, bitter people. Like they would end up acting nice to you at the start, well, both of us to get on the show, and then we bring them on as a guest, and then they'd absolutely dog on us after they got off the show, like immediately, literally the next day afterwards. And we'd done absolutely nothing to them. Like, you know, when we were off air with them, when y'all weren't able to hear the microphones, we would be talking to them. Oh, hey, how are you doing? It's nice to finally meet you. You know, really big fan of your show. Really enjoy it. And we, you know, say nice stuff to them, get them on air. We would treat them all. I mean, you don't see the recorded segment on air, and then they get off, and then the next day they'd be like, yeah, I hate their show. I think they're stupid. And it's like, what the hell? It's like, you know, we had no ill will towards you. It's like, why were you going around making beef? So that kind of started us off in a bad way on YouTube, because then I generally assumed at the start that basically every YouTuber was kind of like an asshole, and I started to think, don't ever meet your heroes. So we got heavily into never having guests for that reason. But then over the years, we've ended up having a lot of YouTube channels reach out to us and say incredibly kind things, and you know, we've gotten along with all of them quite well. I mean, there's probably a couple of them watching right now, like Dennis Davidoff, Civ Div, and others that we've gotten. Preston Stewart, all those amazing folks, and they're great people. I mean, like they're great people. They run great shows. We greatly appreciate what they do. I watch some of their videos from time to time, and I feel like we kind of just started off on the bad foot, and honestly, like a group of bad eggs, like that we tried to like get on at the beginning. But really, there's a lot of great YouTubers out there. It's just that sadly, even knowing that now and having learned that over the years from where it started to where we are now, there really just isn't a way to fit in any of the good folks that we know that also make great videos and whatnot themselves into the format of the live stream. So we might be able to one day do it on a video, like we make specialized documentary videos. We might be able to fit in a couple of them, but we don't know if we even have the time to be able to do those.
You know, the people I'm really interested if we were to have guests on, the people I'd be wanting to bring on are people that are like actively like, you know, pioneering like the new drone technology here in the United States. Like Palmer Luckey would be pretty cool to have on, the Anduril CEO. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. I don't know if he'd come on the show. He's a very busy person, but Zelensky, we've always wanted to have Zelensky on, but the odds of getting Zelensky on the show is not very high because he's obviously fighting a war right now, and he prioritizes certain interviews with like the bigger places for the first ones. But there's people I would have on. I wouldn't even mind having, like, for example, the Secretary of State on, for example. Like, even though I'm not very happy with the way things are going, at least to be able to ask questions and also, you know, ask some of the tough questions, like that would be pretty decent. Obviously, we wouldn't set up to be like a political ambush. We wouldn't do something like that, but just to get like fair questions if they would even answer it, that would be interesting. But it would have to be worthwhile, though. I'm just like, all due respect to all the other YouTubers, by the way. I'm a big fan of like Denis Davidoff, also Preston Stewart, etc. But we each have our own unique like pool that brings in audiences, and we all have that unique like little spark going on. So we've all figured that out. But I'm really interested in hearing from the people that are actually like in the industries and stuff like that.
It would be cool, though, to eventually do a collab with some of the other YouTubers that we do know, like for videos and whatnot, where maybe we guest star in one of their videos or they guest star in ours. That would be pretty neat. But sadly, I really just be entirely honest with you, just knowing like the business end of things, it's very hard to integrate a guest into a live stream, if not impossible, because like the format works in a certain way where I yap nonstop, and that's very hard to get a guest on because I like have to stop kind of like the continuous flow. And a lot of people would think that I'm yapping here endlessly just because I yap like that. Honestly, folks, when I'm off air, I hardly talk, if at all, anymore. I'm very quiet when I'm off air because this takes a lot to do mentally, and it is a deliberate design. Dead space on air is something that can kill a show, and if you know anything about show business at large, not that this is reality TV or television or anything, but show business in large, the running rule is that dead space is bad space. Dead space is going to kill a show. So you have to keep something going on, you have to keep talking, you have to keep doing something, because otherwise the show is going to drop dead. And so bringing on a guest requires you to know them in great detail, really, or do some pre-screening, which usually requires the team to be able to figure out if they're going to have any chemistry with the host to where there isn't going to be any dead space like that, or the chemistry with the host and the co-host, the host and the co-host, so that way there isn't any dead space in those sorts of situations. And that's very hard to pull off because we don't have anyone and really any time ourselves to do any pre-vetting and pre-screening of folks to figure out if there's going to be good enough chemistry to bring them on air and have a really good conversation and make it very engaging and very interesting with very little dead air. And so that's kind of also the issue as well. And that's what we ran into back in the day, is that a lot of people can make great videos, and some of them would seem somewhat interesting, although a lot of these people, like that we brought on back in the day, save for very few, were very venomous people. They had absolutely no chemistry with us, and it became very clear on air that they didn't, because there would be significant amounts of dead air where we would say something to them that was supposed to be a joke, and they wouldn't even react like it was a joke, or they'd say something, and it came off weird, and then we didn't really know how to react to it, and you know, that's a very difficult thing to deal with on the show running side of things, which is, like, specifically as far as the live show goes here, that's my wheelhouse, and I'm the one who notices that the most. I'm like, damn, this is going rough. Like, you know, this is a very hard thing to get through. It feels like pulling teeth. So, you know, that's also kind of a consideration, as well as that it just doesn't really work with a format to where we can keep the lack of dead space going like we do normally, when it's basically just me trying to yap nonstop to keep the dead space from happening. So I hope that does address that the best we can. We'll see someday. Like, video is definitely possible. Like, we could eventually do that with a video, but live stream, sadly, just largely out of the picture. But a huge thanks to you once again, and with that, we're on the next one.
I also have a 20 from My Truck and Travels, and thank you, My Truck and Travels, as well, for that $20 support. And he said, "Good evening, Enforcers. It looks like it's been a hell of a day, and I hope the Iranian-US deal falls apart, and this weekend has been Ukraine's revenge. And Salt Lake City to Miami, Florida, and take one for the chat, my friends, and LLT, LSA."
Salt Lake to Miami?
Yeah, honestly, I would hope the Iran deal falls apart too. Like, I know it's a strange thing to say because they're calling it a peace deal, but, you know, that's the shittiest deal that's ever existed. It's like, if that fell apart, you wouldn't see a tear being shed on my side if it fell apart. I'd be like, thank God, they got to finish the job. So maybe it will. It seems like it already has, really, to be honest.
I would agree. It seems like it's in the process of falling apart, and I think it is going to completely fall apart soon. And I would have to just hope and pray that it does, and that they take the proper action of returning to the war and focusing on the Hormuz, because that's their only hope in hell at this point. Literally the only one. And so, outside of that, though, I would have to say Salt Lake City to Miami. Oh my God. That is long. Like, man, it was 2,000 miles just to get to Birmingham. Driving all the way down to Miami, that's like 2,600 miles or something of driving. That is a long way to go, My Truck and Travels. I hope that you are going to stay awake and aware on that sort of a drive. Not that you're going to be up the whole way nonstop, but that is one hell of a length of a drive. You're going to literally see the whole